The doctor said it was a fall. The police report called it an unfortunate accident. But the bruises circling 6-year-old Emma Grace Wilson's throat told a different story. A story written in purple and black, in fingerprints that were too large to belong to anyone but an adult. A story that was currently fighting for survival on a heart monitor in the pediatric intensive care unit of St. Michael's Medical Center. Standing over her wasn't a grieving parent or a tearful guardian. It was a 300-pound man named Marcus Callahan, though everyone who knew him called him by a different name. Gunner. He wore a leather vest covered in patches, the largest, showing a skull with motorcycle wheels for eyes, and beneath it the words Iron Horseman Motorcycle Club. He wasn't related to Emma Grace. He didn't even know her last name until 3 hours ago. But as he watched that little girl fight for every shallow breath through a ventilator tube, as he listened to the steady beep of machines doing the work her small body couldn't manage, Gunner made a silent vow that would shake the foundations of an entire city. Whoever did this wasn't going to face a judge. They were going to face him. 8 hours earlier, the neon lights of the Golden Crown Casino didn't look glamorous at 3 in the morning. They looked desperate, flickering against the wet asphalt like a warning signal nobody was sober enough to see. The parking lot was a graveyard of bad decisions, illuminated by sodium lights that turned everything the color of old bruises. Inside a rusted 2008 Honda Civic parked in the furthest corner of the lot, Emma Grace Wilson was trying to make herself invisible. She was 6 years old, small for her age, with hair the color of wheat that hadn't been brushed in 3 days. She was wrapped in a scratchy blanket that smelled like stale cigarette smoke, and old French fries from the McDonald's bag crumpled on the floor. Her stomach gave a low, painful rumble. She pressed both hands against it, trying to silence the sound. Aunt Diane didn't like it when she complained. Aunt Diane said complaining was for ungrateful brats who didn't appreciate sacrifice. "I'll be 5 minutes, Em. Just 5 minutes. I've got a feeling this machine is hot." That had been 4.5 hours ago. Emma exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cold window. With one small finger, she traced a face in the condensation. A sad face, because that's what she felt inside. She missed her mom. She missed her dad. But thinking about the car crash that took them away 8 months ago made her chest hurt so badly she couldn't breathe. So she tried to think about other things instead. She counted the raindrops racing down the glass. 147 so far. She counted the headlights of cars leaving the casino. 23. She watched people stumbling through the heavy glass doors, some laughing, some shouting, some looking like they wanted to cry to mine. She knew which category Aunt Diane would fall into. Inside the Golden Crown Casino, Diane Crawford was sweating. It was a cold sweat, the kind that prickles at your hairline and makes your shirt stick to your back like a second skin. She was perched on a high leather stool in front of a slot machine called Emerald Fortune, her bloodshot eyes fixed on the spinning reels with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Her fingers adorned with chipped red nail polish and fake gold rings tapped a frantic rhythm on the spin button. Click, whir, stop. Nothing. Click, whir, stop, nothing. "Come on, you piece of junk," Diane hissed, her voice raspy from chain-smoking Virginia Slims. "Give it to me. Just once. Give it to me." She had walked into this casino 5 hours ago with $1,200 in cash. Rent money. It was supposed to go to the landlord, Mr. Henderson, who had already threatened to change the locks and put her belongings on the curb. But Diane had convinced herself she could double it, triple it even. If she could just hit one jackpot, she could pay the rent, fix the transmission in the Honda, maybe even buy Emma some new clothes that actually fit. It was logical. It was a plan. It was going to work. The credit counter on her machine read $40. Diane stared at that number like it was a death sentence. $40 from $1,200. The reality hit her like a physical blow to the gut, forcing the air from her lungs. The money was gone. All of it. The rent, the grocery money, the $50 she'd promised to send Emma's school for the field trip. "No," she whispered to the machine. "No, no, no." She dug into her purse with shaking hands, her acrylic nails scraping against the leather bottom. A tube of lipstick, a lighter, a crumpled receipt from a gas station. Empty. Diane slammed her fist against the glass screen of the slot machine, hard enough to make the reels jump. "You rigged it, you thieves." A security guard named Carl, a heavy-set man who had already kicked Diane out twice in the past month, started walking toward her with the determined gait of someone tired of dealing with the same problem. Diane didn't wait. She grabbed her purse and scrambled off the stool, her face burning with a mixture of humiliation and a white-hot rage that made her vision pulse red at the edges. It wasn't her fault. It never was. It was the machine. It was the bad luck. It was the stress of having to take care of a kid she never wanted in the first place. The thought festered in her mind as she shoved through the heavy glass doors and out into the cold night air. Ever since her sister Sarah died in that crash and saddled her with Emma Diane's life, had spiraled downward. The kid was expensive. The kid needed clothes. The kid needed food. The kid looked at her with those big, judging eyes that looked exactly like Sarah's, full of silent accusations. Sarah, the golden child. Sarah, who their parents had always loved more. Sarah, who even in death had found a way to ruin Diane's life. Diane marched across the parking lot, her high heels clicking aggressively against the wet pavement. The rain had picked up, turning into a steady downpour that soaked through her cheap jacket within seconds. She didn't have an umbrella. Of course she didn't. She was vibrating with anger, with the need to blame someone, anyone, for the $1,200 that had just disappeared into a slot machine. She needed a target. She reached the Honda Civic. The windows were completely fogged over now. She ripped the driver's door open and threw herself into the seat, bringing a spray of rainwater with her. Emma, startled from a light doze, sat up in the back seat and rubbed her eyes with small fists. Aunt Diane, the innocent hope in that small voice, the expectation that maybe things would be okay, that maybe they could go home now, snapped the last fraying thread of Diane's sanity. Diane whipped around in her seat, her eyes wild. Did we win? Did we? Is that what you want to ask me? Emma shrank back against the door, pulling the blanket up to her chin like armor. I just meant, no, Diane screamed, and the sound was so loud in the enclosed space that Emma flinched as if she'd been struck. No, we didn't win. We lost everything. Do you understand? Everything, and you know whose fault it is. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. You, Diane roared. You and your bad luck. You've been a curse on me since the day you walked into my house. I didn't mean. The Emma whispered, but Diane wasn't listening anymore. She started the car, the engine sputtering and coughing, before finally catching. She slammed it into reverse without checking her mirrors and peeled out of the parking spot with a squeal of tires. She drove erratically, swerving between lanes, heading toward the exit. But she didn't leave the casino lot. Instead, she jerked the wheel hard to the right, pulling into a secluded overflow area behind the dumpsters, a dark corner where the security cameras didn't quite reach and the lights didn't penetrate. A place where people went when they didn't want to be seen. She slammed on the brakes. The car jerked to a violent halt. Aunt Diane, Emma's voice was trembling now, high and frightened. Why are we stopping? I want to go home. Diane unbuckled her seatbelt with shaking hands. Her breathing was coming in short, harsh gasps. When she turned to look at Emma, there was something in her eyes that didn't look human anymore. It looked feral, broken. We're not going home, Diane said, her voice dropping to something cold and flat. Not yet. You need to learn a lesson, Emma. You need to learn what happens when you curse a family. She opened her door and stepped out into the rain. Then she yanked open the back door with such force that Emma cried out. Get out, Diane hissed. No, please, Emma cried, clutching the seatbelt with both hands. It's raining. It's dark. I'm scared. Diane reached in, grabbed Emma by her thin arm, and dragged her out of the car. Emma hit the wet pavement hard, her knees scraping against gravel and broken glass. She cried out, a high-pitched sound of pain and terror that was immediately swallowed by the sound of rain and distant traffic on the highway. Shut up, Diane screamed. The first slap echoed louder than the rain. 3 blocks away in the back corner of the Golden Crown Casino's parking lot, Marcus Gunnar Callahan was not a nice man. He would be the first to tell you that. At 45 years old, Gunnar was 6 feet 4 inches of scarred muscle and bad attitude, with a gray beard that reached his chest and arms covered in ink that told the story of a life lived on the margins of polite society. He was the sergeant-at-arms for the Iron Horsemen, a motorcycle club that the local police considered a criminal organization and the local populace considered terrifying. Gunnar had done time. He had broken bones. He had done things in the name of the club that kept him awake at night, staring at ceilings and trying to remember what it felt like to be clean. But tonight, Gunnar wasn't doing club business. He was just trying to fix his bike. His custom Harley-Davidson, a 1995 Softail that he'd rebuilt from the frame-up, had developed a rattle in the primary drive just as he was passing the Golden Crown. He had coasted into the back of the parking lot under the shelter of a concrete overhang near the loading docks to take a look. He had his toolkit spread out on a shop rag and a flashlight clenched between his teeth, grease covering his scarred hands as he worked. He was tightening a bolt when he heard the scream. It wasn't the usual casino scream, not drunk laughter or a couple fighting over who was too intoxicated to drive. This was different. This was the sound of pure, unadulterated fear. This was the sound of a child. Gunnar froze the wrench still in his hand. He took the flashlight out of his mouth and cocked his head, listening. The rain drummed steadily on the concrete above him, but through it he heard something that made his blood run cold. Smack. Please, Aunt Diane, stop. I'm sorry. The voice was tiny, broken, desperate. Gunnar dropped his wrench. It hit the concrete with a metallic clang that was drowned out by another sound. A woman's voice screaming with a rage that sounded inhuman. You ungrateful little wretch! You cost me everything. Gunnar stood up slowly. He wiped his greasy hands on his jeans, leaving dark streaks. He didn't run. Gunnar didn't run for anyone. But he moved with a terrifyingly silent purpose, his boots making no sound on the wet pavement as he walked around the corner of the loading dock toward the dark area behind the dumpsters. What he saw stopped him cold. A woman in a cheap raincoat was standing over a small bundle on the ground. She was kicking. She was kicking a child who was curled into a fetal position, small arms wrapped around her head, trying desperately to protect herself. Each impact of the woman's boot against the small body made a sickening thud that Gunnar felt in his chest. Gunnar had seen bar fights. He had seen stabbings. He had seen men beaten within an inch of their lives over debts and disrespect. He had done 2 tours in Iraq and seen things that still haunted his dreams. But seeing a grown woman putting her foot into the ribs of a 6-year-old girl triggered something primal in his brain. It wasn't anger. It was colder than anger. It was the executioner's judgment. Hey! Gunnar's voice was a low rumble, like thunder rolling across a valley. The woman didn't hear him. She was in a frenzy, completely lost in her rage. She grabbed the child by her hair and yanked her head up. The little girl's face was a mask of blood and tears, her eyes rolling back, consciousness fading. I said, Gunnar roared, his voice booming off the casino walls like a gunshot. Hey! The woman froze. She dropped the child's head. It hit the pavement with a sickening thud that made Gunnar's stomach turn. She spun around wild-eyed to see a giant of a man stepping out of the shadows. He looked like a nightmare-given form. Long gray beard dripping with rain, leather vest with patches that marked him as someone you didn't mess with, arms covered in tattoos, some of them prison work, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the night and rain. Who the hell are you? The woman shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria and fear. Mind your own business. This is family business. Gunnar didn't stop walking until he was 2 feet away from her. He towered over her, the rain dripping off his beard. He looked down at the girl. Emma wasn't moving. A small pool of blood was mixing with the rainwater around her head, creating a pink puddle that reflected the distant casino lights. Her small chest was barely rising and falling. Each breath came with a wet, wheezing sound. Gunnar looked back at the woman. His voice when he spoke was dangerously quiet. Family business. She fell, the woman stammered, and Gunnar could see reality crashing in on her as she realized just how large and dangerous the man in front of her was. She took a step back, her heel splashing in a puddle. She's clumsy. I was trying to help her up and she started screaming. She's a drama queen. You know how kids are. Gunnar looked at the blood on the woman's shoe. He looked at the gravel embedded in her knuckles. He looked at the child, at the boot-shaped bruises already forming on her ribs, at the handprints around her throat, at the way her left arm was bent at an unnatural angle. You're lying, Gunnar said flatly. You can't prove anything, the woman yelled, but her voice was shaking now. She was calculating, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to turn this around. Get away from me or I'll scream rape. I'll call the cops. I'll tell them you attacked us. Call them, Gunnar said. Please. He knelt beside Emma, ignoring the mud and the grease and the blood. He gently placed one massive scarred hand on her back. He could feel the shallow, ragged rise and fall of her ribs. She was wheezing each breath, a wet, struggling sound that meant internal bleeding. He'd heard that sound before in Fallujah, in men who were dying. "Hey, little bit," Gunnar whispered, his voice softening in a way that would have shocked anyone who knew him. "Can you hear me?" Emma's eyelids fluttered. One eye was swollen completely shut, the orbital bone visibly fractured. The other open just a crack, glassy and unfocused. Seeing something that wasn't quite there. "Bear," she whispered. It was a nonsensical murmur, perhaps a hallucination, perhaps seeing the patches on his vest, perhaps just the last word of a dying child. "Yeah," Gunnar said gently, his throat tight. "I'm Bear, and I got you now, little bit. I promise. You hear me? I promise I got you." He stood up, scooping Emma into his arms as easily as if she were made of air. Her head lolled against his chest, staining his leather vest with blood. She was so light, too light, like a bird with hollow bones. He could feel every one of her ribs. When was the last time this kid had eaten a real meal? The woman lunged forward. "Put her down. That's my niece. You can't take her. That's kidnapping." Gunnar turned to look at her. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't need to. He simply removed his sunglasses with one hand, revealing eyes that were cold, hard steel. Eyes that had seen things in Iraq that never made it into news reports. Eyes that had watched his own daughter in a hospital bed 8 years ago. Eyes that held the kind of violence that stayed restrained only by choice. "You touch me," Gunnar said, his voice carrying a promise that was more terrifying than any threat, "and God won't find all the pieces." The woman faltered, her hand hovering in the air. Fear finally overtook her anger. She took a step back, then another. Gunnar turned his back on her. He walked straight toward the casino entrance, his boots splashing through puddles, carrying the limp, broken body of Emma Grace Wilson into the bright lights. Behind him, he could hear the woman screaming, "Where are you going? That's kidnapping. I'll call the police. You can't take her. She's mine." Gunnar ignored her. He kicked open the side doors of the casino lobby with his boot, carrying Emma through. The contrast was jarring. Outside, darkness and rain and ambulance. Inside, bright lights, in the cheerful electronic music of slot machines, in the smell of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. Security guard Carl looked up from his phone, his face going from annoyance to horror in the space of a heartbeat. Carl saw the blood dripping onto the polished marble floor. He saw the small, broken girl in the arms of a massive biker. He saw the gray pallor of her skin, the way her head hung limp, the blood soaking through the biker's vest. "Call 911, Gunnar barked at him. "Now." What happened?" Carl stammered, already reaching for his radio with shaking hands. "Someone tried to kill a kid," Gunnar said, his jaw tight. "Get an ambulance here in the next 5 minutes or she dies. You understand me? 5 minutes." Carl's radio crackled as he called it in. Around them, the casino was going silent. Gamblers stopped mid-pull. Dealers paused with cards in their hands. Everyone was staring at the surreal scene of a Hells Angels biker covered in a child's blood standing in the middle of the casino floor. Behind him, Diane came running through the doors, and she was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She threw her hands up, sobbing hysterically, her voice rising to a pitch that carried across the entire lobby. "Oh my God, my baby, that man attacked us. He hurt my Emma." Gunnar turned slowly. The casino lobby went silent. Even the slot machines seemed to quiet. Gamblers froze mid-step. Diane pointed a shaking finger at Gunnar, her face a mask of theatrical horror. "He tried to rob us in the parking lot. I said we didn't have any money, and he grabbed Emma and started hitting her. He threw her on the ground. Please, someone help me. He's a monster. Someone call the police." Gunnar looked at the security guard. Then he looked at the growing crowd of witnesses. He looked down at Emma, who had gone completely limp in his arms, her small chest barely moving. He knew how this looked. A Hells Angels biker holding a battered child, blood all over his clothes, and a crying woman pointing the finger. He knew the cops would believe the crying aunt over the biker with a record. He knew he was probably going to jail. But Gunnar didn't care about jail. He'd done jail before. 8 years total across 3 stretches. He could do it standing on his head. He felt Emma's heartbeat against his palm. It was slow, too slow, fading like a candle in the wind. "Carl Parr," Gunnar said, staring the guard in the eyes. "Call that ambulance. And if you let that woman leave this building before the cops get here, you answer to me. Understand?" Carl nodded, his hand already on the phone. Then Gunnar did something he hadn't done in 20 years. Not since the day his daughter Lily died in his arms in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and death. Not since he'd held her tiny hand and watched the monitors flatline and felt his entire world collapse. He prayed, "Don't you die on me, kid," he whispered into Emma's blood-matted hair. "Don't you dare die. I made you a promise. I got you. You hear me, I got you." Emma's eyelid fluttered once. Her lips moved, forming a word without sound. And then she was still. The waiting room of St. Michael's Medical Center was purgatory, made of beige walls and outdated magazines, smelling of antiseptic and stale coffee. But for Detective Frank Morrison, it smelled like a cover-up. Morrison was 52 years old, 20 years into a career that had left him tired and cynical. He'd seen enough domestic violence cases to write a tragic encyclopedia. 347 cases in his career. 291 convictions, 56 cases where the victim recanted or disappeared or died before trial. He stood near the vending machines watching the woman and his cop. Instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Diane Crawford was wrapped in a hospital blanket someone had given her, sobbing into a paper cup of water. A social worker named Martha sat beside her, rubbing her back and murmuring soothing words. Diane's performance was flawless. The trembling hands, the mascara running down her cheeks in artistic streaks, the way she clutched the blanket like a lifeline. "He came out of nowhere," Diane wailed loud enough for everyone in the waiting room to hear. Every word perfectly calibrated for maximum sympathy. "We were just walking to our car. Emma was so happy. We'd had such a nice dinner together. She loves the desserts at the casino buffet. Then that monster." She broke down again, her shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded rehearsed to Morrison's experienced ear. Morrison scribbled in his notebook. Subject claims unprovoked attack by motorcycle club member. States robbery motive. Suspect Marcus Gunnar Callahan, age 45. Known Iron Horseman affiliation. 3 prior assault convictions. Currently on parole. On paper, it was an open and shut case. A violent biker with a rap sheet 3 pages long attacks a defenseless woman and child in a casino parking lot. Callahan had been found literally holding the body covered in the victim's blood from head to toe. He had practically confessed to being at the scene. The witness was crying and traumatized. The victim was a 6-year-old girl fighting for her life 3 floors up. But something itched at the back of Morrison's neck. The same itch that had solved the Henderson cold case in 2019. The same itch that had caught the River Valley Strangler when everyone else was looking in the wrong direction. The same itch that had saved his ass twice in internal affairs investigations. 2 hours ago, when the police had arrived at the casino lobby with guns drawn, screaming at Callahan to get on the ground, the biker had done something strange, something that didn't fit the profile of a violent predator. He had gently set the girl down on the stretcher the paramedics were rolling in, not dropped her, not thrown her, gently, like she was made of glass. He had kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it didn't match the skull patches on his vest or the teardrops tattooed by his eye. Then he had turned around and put his hands behind his back without a word of protest, without resistance, without the usual screaming about lawyers and rights that Morrison heard from guilty men. He hadn't yelled, "I didn't do it." He hadn't tried to run. He hadn't made excuses. He had looked Morrison dead in the eye and said one thing, his voice calm and steady: "Check the aunt's hands." Now Morrison walked over to where Diane sat, pulling out his notebook. "Miss Crawford." Diane looked up, her mascara running in perfect streaks down her cheeks, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Did you catch him? Is he in jail? Please tell me he's in jail." "Mr. Callahan is in custody," Morrison said carefully, his cop voice neutral and professional. "He's being processed right now. I just need to clarify a few things about the timeline for the report to make sure the charges stick." "Timeline?" Diane's voice went sharp for just a fraction of a second, a flash of genuine anger cutting through the grief before she caught herself. "My niece is in a coma because of him." "What timeline is there?" "He wanted my purse," Emma screamed. "He hit her. He kept hitting her until I thought she was dead." "I understand, ma'am," Morrison said, keeping his voice neutral. "We just need to be thorough. Defense lawyers look for any inconsistency, any gap in the story. We want to make sure this monster goes away for life. You understand?" Diane nodded, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. You said you were walking to the car after dinner at the casino buffet, correct? Yes, Emma loves their buffet, the desserts especially. She had 3 pieces of chocolate cake. Diane's voice had the rehearsed quality of a prepared lie. The casino buffet closes at 10 p.m. on weekdays, Miss Crawford. The incident occurred at 3:15 in the morning. That's more than 5 hours later. Diane froze. It was just for a second, barely noticeable, but Morrison saw it. Her eyes darted to the left. A classic tell that someone was accessing the creative part of their brain to construct a lie rather than the memory centers to recall truth. We played a few games after dinner, Diane said, quickly recovering. Emma sat with me at the slots. She likes watching the pretty lights. Is that a crime? I lost track of time. I'm not a perfect guardian detective, I know that, but I was trying to give her a nice evening. And you said he hit her with his fists multiple times. Yes, over and over. I tried to stop him. I screamed for help, but no one came. The parking lot was empty. The tears started again right on cue. Okay, Morrison said, looking down at Diane's hands where they clutched the water cup. Miss Crawford, your knuckles look swollen, abraded, and you have cuts on your right palm. Fresh ones, still bleeding through the band-aids the nurse gave you. Diane pulled her hands back instantly, hiding them under the blanket like a child caught stealing cookies. I tried to fight him off. I punched his helmet, his motorcycle helmet. It was hard. Cut my hands. I scratched him. I was trying to save her. What kind of aunt would I be if I didn't fight for my niece? Right, Morrison said. He flipped his notebook closed, but his mind was racing. We'll be in touch, Miss Crawford. Try to get some rest. He didn't believe him, but believing wasn't the same as proving. Not yet. 3 floors down in a secured room used for treating prisoners, Marcus Gunnar Callahan sat handcuffed to a metal bed frame. They had stripped him of his leather vest with all his patches that represented 12 years of his life in the Iron Horseman and bagged it as evidence. He felt naked without it, exposed. He was wearing a hospital gown over his jeans, and a young beat cop, who looked fresh out of the academy, stood by the door with his hand resting nervously on his taser. The cop couldn't have been more than 23. Probably thought he was guarding a monster. Gunnar stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the stains. 47 of them. Brown water damage from a leak that maintenance had never quite fixed. He wasn't worried about jail time. He could do time standing on his head. He'd done 3 separate stretches over 15 years. 2 years in Lompoc for assault when he was 25. 3 years in San Quentin for assault with a deadly weapon when he was 30. 3 more years in Pelican Bay for parole violation when he was 35. A total of 8 years inside, and he knew how to survive it. How to keep his head down. How to find allies. How to make the time pass. But he was worried about Emma, the little girl with hair like wheat and eyes that looked too old for 6 years, eyes that had seen too much pain already. He had heard the paramedics talking in the ambulance bay as they loaded her in, professional medical terminology that he'd learned to decode during Lily's illness. Cerebral edema, brain swelling, fractured orbital bone, the eye socket crushed, internal bleeding in the abdomen, possible spinal damage, probable renal contusion, 4 broken ribs, radius fracture, severe concussion, traumatic asphyxiation. She was so small, too small. When he'd picked her up, she'd felt like nothing, like he could break her just by holding her wrong. She probably weighed 40 pounds soaking wet. A healthy 6-year-old should weigh closer to 50. She was malnourished on top of everything else. Hey, Gunnar grunted, his voice rough. The young cop jumped like he'd been shocked. Quiet, Callahan, no talking. I don't want to chat, kid, up there, Gunnar said, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes and whiskey. I just want to know if she's alive. The girl, is she alive? That's none of your business, the cop spat, his hand tightening on the taser. You did enough damage, you sick piece of garbage. Gunnar chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that had no mirth in it. If I did it, kid, she wouldn't be in the hospital. She'd be in the morgue. I don't leave work unfinished. When I hurt someone, they stay hurt. The cop's face went pale. His hand moved to his gun. Relax, Gunnar said. I'm just saying, think about it logically. If I wanted to hurt a kid, would I carry her into a casino full of witnesses? Would I wait for an ambulance? Use your brain, Rook. The door buzzed open. Detective Morrison walked in looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last 2 hours. There were new lines around his eyes. He pulled up a metal folding chair and sat backward on it, facing Gunner. Marcus Callahan, Morrison said, opening a file folder. Also known as Gunner, age 45, Sergeant-at-Arms for the Iron Horseman Motorcycle Club, 3 prior assault convictions, currently on parole, and now we're looking at assault with a deadly weapon on a minor, attempted murder of a child under 12, kidnapping. You're a 3-striker, Marcus. This puts you away forever. Life without parole. You die in a cage. Gunner looked at the detective, really looked at him. Morrison had cop eyes, tired eyes, eyes that had seen too much. But there was something else there, a flicker of doubt maybe. I didn't touch her, Gunner said simply. Witness says otherwise. Multiple witnesses. Security guard says he saw you holding her covered in blood. Blood evidence puts her all over you. Her DNA on your hands, your clothes, your vest. Your fingerprints are on her body. Of course they are, Gunner said calmly. I carried her inside. I picked her up off the ground where her aunt left her to die. I held her so she wouldn't be alone while she bled out in a parking lot. Yeah, my prints are on her, because I saved her life. Morrison raised an eyebrow. That's a hell of a story, Callahan. It's not a story, it's what happened. Gunner leaned forward as far as the handcuffs would allow. Check the cameras. The overflow lot behind the casino might be a blind spot, but check the casino floor cameras. Check the timestamps. See what time the aunt walked into the casino. See what time she walked out. See how long that kid was alone in the car. Then check the aunt's bank records. I guarantee you she drained every cent she had before she walked out to that parking lot. Morrison stayed silent, but he was listening. Really listening. Most perps just yelled, I didn't do it, over and over like a broken record. Callahan was giving him a roadmap to an investigation. Details, specifics, things that could be verified or disproven. Why do you care? Morrison asked, genuinely curious. You're a 1%er, a biker. Since when do guys like you care about citizens, about kids you don't know? Gunner leaned back against the metal bed frame. The handcuffs clinked against the railing. He was quiet for a long moment, and Morrison could see something working behind those hard eyes. Pain, maybe. Old grief. I have a daughter, Gunner said softly. His voice changed when he said it. Became almost human. Had a daughter, Lily. She died 8 years ago. Congenital heart defect. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. She was 7 years old. The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant beep of monitors from other rooms. When I heard that scream tonight, Gunner continued, his voice rough with emotion he was trying to suppress. It wasn't some random kid to me. It was a little girl being beaten to death in a parking lot while everyone else walked by and minded their own business. And I saw that woman. I saw her putting her boot into that child's ribs. I saw her grab that little girl by the hair and smash her head into the pavement. And I made a choice. I could walk away, mind my own business, fix my bike and ride off. Or I could do something. So you did something, Morrison said. Yeah, I did something. Gunner met Morrison's eyes. If you want to lock me up, detective, lock me up. I've done time before. I can do it again. But if you let that woman walk out of this hospital, if you let her anywhere near that little girl when she wakes up, then you're the criminal. Not me, because that woman tried to murder her own niece and she'll try again to cover it up. Morrison studied Gunner's face. 20 years as a detective had taught him to read people, to see through the lies. And sitting across from him wasn't a child predator, wasn't a violent psychopath. He saw a man who had done bad things, yes, but who had also just done something impossibly good. I can't cut you loose, Marcus, Morrison said, standing up and tucking the folder under his arm. Not with the DA breathing down my neck and half the city watching this case. The media already has it. Biker attacks innocent family. The narrative is set, but I'll check the bank records. I'll check the cameras. I'll do my job. Gunner nodded once. One more thing. What? Don't let that woman in the room with the kid, not alone, not ever. If Emma wakes up, she's the only witness. The aunt knows that. Morrison paused at the door, a chill running down his spine. He hadn't thought of that, hadn't considered that the aunt might try to finish what she started. I'll put a uniform on the door, Morrison said quietly, 24/7, just in case. Thank you. As Morrison left, Gunnar closed his eyes. In his mind, he was back in a different hospital room 8 years ago, holding Lily's hand as the monitors flatlined, watching the doctors try and fail to restart her tiny heart, feeling his entire world end in that sterile room that smelled like failure. He had made Lily a promise in those final moments. As she took her last breath, he had whispered to her that he would help other kids, that he wouldn't let what happened to her happen to anyone else if he could stop it, that her death wouldn't be meaningless. He hadn't been able to save Lily. The disease was genetic, unstoppable, cruel. A defect she was born with that slowly destroyed her heart over 7 years, until it finally gave out despite 3 surgeries and endless treatments. But maybe, just maybe, he could save Emma Grace, if they let him, if she survived the night. 3 days passed like a slow-motion nightmare. The rain that had started the night of the attack never really stopped. It settled into a persistent drizzle that turned the city gray and cold, matching the mood inside St. Michael's Medical Center. The weather report called it an atmospheric river, the kind of storm system that could sit over a region for a week, dumping inches of rain every day until the streets flooded and the rivers overflowed their banks. Emma Grace Wilson lay in the pediatric intensive care unit room 304, a tiny figure lost among a tangle of tubes and wires that kept her alive. The rhythmic whoosh hiss of the ventilator was the only sound in the room, a mechanical breathing that her small body couldn't manage on its own. Her face was swollen beyond recognition, purple and yellow bruising distorting her features into something that barely looked human. Her head was wrapped in heavy gauze. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking a heartbeat that was strong enough to live, but weak enough to worry the doctors who checked on her every hour. She was in a medically induced coma, floating in a gray space between consciousness and death, while her brain's swelling slowly subsided. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the attending physician, had explained it to the nurses in clinical terms. Induced coma to reduce metabolic demand, prevent secondary injury, allow the brain tissue to heal. But what she didn't say, what she couldn't say, was that Emma might never wake up, that the damage might be too severe, that even if she did wake up, she might not be the same girl who went to sleep. The doctor said it could be days, it could be weeks, it could be never. In the hallway outside room 304, the media circus had taken up permanent residence. News vans parked on the street below. Reporters with perfect hair and practiced sympathy stood in front of cameras talking about the tragedy, the innocent victim, the brutal attack, the monster in leather and patches. Diane Crawford had been very, very busy. Within 6 hours of the attack, she had contacted News Channel 7, claiming she had an exclusive story about a violent biker gang targeting innocent families at casinos. She'd cried on cue, hit all the emotional beats. The producer had eaten it up. By the next morning, she was standing in front of a bank of microphones on the hospital steps wearing a modest black dress she'd bought at Walmart with money borrowed from a sympathetic neighbor named Carol, who'd believed every word of her story. She clutched a teddy bear that Emma had never owned, purchased at the hospital gift shop for $15 specifically for the photo op. "It's a tragedy," Diane sobbed into the cameras, her voice breaking at all the right moments. Years of lying had made her an expert at manipulation. "My poor baby, my sweet innocent Emma. All we want is justice. We want that animal locked away forever so he can never hurt another child. No family should go through what we're going through." The headline on the News Channel 7 ticker read, "Biker Brutality. Aunt pleads for justice as niece fights for life." The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up, then regional. By day 2, it had gone national. CNN ran a segment. Fox News interviewed a motorcycle gang expert. MSNBC did a special on violence in America. Diane Crawford, formerly a nobody, a gambling addict living in a crummy apartment with an eviction notice on her door, was suddenly famous, sympathetic, a victim. She had set up a GoFundMe page within 12 hours. Emma's recovery fund helped this innocent child. She'd spent 2 hours crafting the perfect story, a heartbreaking tale of being a struggling single guardian trying her best after her sister died tragically, about medical bills that would bury them, about the trauma they would both need years of therapy to overcome, about giving Emma a chance at a normal life after this horror. The donation started small, $20 from someone in Ohio, $50 from a grandmother in Florida. But as the news story spread, as Diane's tearful face appeared on more and more screens, the numbers climbed. 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. By day 3, the fund had raised $28,000. Diane watched the number tick upward on her phone screen, alone in a hospital bathroom stall on the second floor, where no one could see her, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The kind of smile that never touched her eyes. It was more money than she'd ever had in her life. More than she'd made in 2 years at her last job before they fired her for stealing from the register. The gambling debts to Tony Messina and his crew were paid. All $6,000 plus the $2,000 in interest they'd tacked on. The rent was covered for the next 4 months. Mr. Henderson had actually apologized for threatening to evict her when he saw her on the news. People were sending her gift cards to restaurants, casseroles she'd never eat, messages of support from strangers who thought they knew her story. But there was a problem that kept Diane awake at night, pacing her apartment, chain smoking, and drinking cheap vodka straight from the bottle. The doctor said Emma was stabilizing. The brain swelling was going down faster than expected. Her vitals were improving. There was a strong chance, that she would wake up. And if Emma woke up, she would talk. Diane sat in the hospital cafeteria at 2 in the morning, stirring sugar into her coffee with shaking hands. Not from grief, not from worry about Emma, from adrenaline and calculation and a cold, creeping fear that wrapped around her chest like a vice. If Emma woke up and told them the truth, everything would collapse. The donations, the sympathy, the narrative she'd so carefully constructed. They would see through her. They would take Emma away and put Diane in prison. And Diane had seen enough crime shows to know what happened to people who hurt kids in prison. Even the hardened criminals had a code. Child abusers were the lowest of the low. They didn't last long. She couldn't let that happen. Diane finished her coffee, threw the cup away with enough force that it bounced off the rim of the trash can, and walked back toward the ICU. Her mind was racing, running through scenarios, calculating odds. 2 police officers were stationed outside Emma's door. One was young, maybe 25, always on his phone reading something. The other was older, more alert, a veteran cop with suspicious eyes. "I want to see my niece," Diane said, putting on her grief-stricken face. The mask she'd worn so well for 3 days that it was starting to feel natural. "Sorry, ma'am," the younger officer said without looking up from his phone. "Detective Morrison's orders. No visitors without supervision." "I'm her legal guardian," Diane shrieked, letting real anger bleed through, letting them see the rage that simmered just below the surface. "She's my flesh and blood, my sister's only child. You can't keep me from her." "We can, and we are," the older officer said, crossing his arms. His nameplate read Williams. He'd been a cop for 26 years and had seen every kind of domestic violence. Something about this woman set off alarm bells. "You want to see her? You wait until the detective authorizes it. Those are the rules." Diane's face went red. "This is illegal. I'll sue the department. I'll call my lawyer. You have no right to keep a guardian from her child." "She's not your child, ma'am," Williams said flatly. "She's your niece. And until the investigation is complete, those are the rules. You can complain to Detective Morrison if you like. His number is on the card he gave you." Diane stormed off down the hallway, her heels clicking aggressively on the linoleum floor. Her mind was spinning. She needed a better lawyer. Not the free legal aid public defender they'd assigned her for the victim impact statement. Someone who could manipulate the system. Someone who knew how to make problems disappear. Someone who could get her access to Emma before the girl woke up and ruined everything. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Victor Brennan, a lawyer who'd helped her beat a DUI charge 3 years ago when she'd blown .15 and crashed into a mailbox. He'd gotten the charges reduced to reckless driving, kept her license, kept her out of jail. He was expensive, but he was good. And she had $28,000 now. She could afford expensive. She dialed the number. It rang 4 times before a gravelly voice answered. "Brennan?" "Victor, it's Diane Crawford. I need your help." Across town in a blacked-out SUV parked outside the county jail, Marcus Gunnar Callahan climbed into the passenger seat wearing the same blood-stained clothes he'd been arrested in. They'd kept him for 72 hours, the maximum they could hold him without charging him. The DA wanted to charge him, wanted to make an example, but Morrison had pushed back. said there were inconsistencies, said they needed more time to investigate. Gunner smelled like jail soap and industrial disinfectant. He looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes from 3 nights of sleeping on a concrete bunk with a rolled-up jacket for a pillow. Waiting for him was James Whelan, the Iron Horseman's lawyer. Whelan was in his early 60s with a neatly trimmed gray beard and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a three-piece suit that probably cost more than Gunner's motorcycle. In his previous life, before he'd started representing motorcycle clubs, Whelan had been a prosecutor. He knew how the system worked from the inside. "Tell me you got something," Gunner said, as Whelan pulled into traffic, heading toward the freeway. "It's messy, brother," Whelan replied, his voice carrying the educated diction of someone who'd gone to law school at Stanford. "The public hates you. The news is painting you as the devil incarnate. They're digging up your old assault charges, making you sound like a serial violent offender who targets women and children. Social media is calling for your head. There's a petition with 50,000 signatures demanding you get life without parole." "I don't care about the news," Gunner growled, staring out the window at the rain-soaked city. "What about the kid? Is she alive?" "Still in a coma, but stable. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. The brain swelling is responding to treatment. They might try bringing her out of the coma in the next few days if she continues to improve." Gunner exhaled slowly, the first relief he'd felt in 3 days. "Thank God." "Don't thank God yet," Whelan said, his voice turning grim. "The aunt is making moves. She filed a restraining order against you this morning. 500 feet. She's also petitioning the court to have medical decision-making power expedited. She wants to move Emma to a long-term care facility in Oregon. Someplace called Riverside Extended Care. I looked it up. It's basically a warehouse where they put vegetative patients and forget about them. She wants to move her so she can disappear." Gunner said, his jaw tightening. "Or so she can pull the plug without anyone watching. Oregon has different laws. Easier to terminate life support if the guardian claims it's in the best interest of the patient." "Exactly." Whelan agreed, merging onto the freeway. "But we have a lead. I had a private investigator look into Diane Crawford. Guy named Rick Thompson, former LAPD, good at finding dirt. She's mostly a ghost. Moves around a lot. Changes addresses every year or two, usually one step ahead of eviction notices. But Thompson found her ex-husband. Guy named Kyle Crawford lives in a trailer park in Nevada about 150 miles from here, place called Whispering Pines. And Thompson talked to him on the phone. Kyle says he has videos from when they were married. Says Diane has a temper. Says she's violent when she loses at gambling. Says he has proof." "I need to talk to him," Gunner said. "Gunner, you're out on bail. $50,000 that the club put up. If you violate the terms, if you get caught intimidating witnesses or leaving the county without permission, they revoke bail and you go back in. And this time you stay in until trial." "I'm not going to intimidate him," Gunner said, cracking his knuckles. The sound was loud in the enclosed space of the SUV. "I'm going to ask him nicely to do the right thing. That's not intimidation. That's conversation." Whelan sighed, but he knew better than to argue with Gunner when he had that look in his eyes. That look that said he'd already made up his mind and nothing would change it. "Fine, but I'm coming with you. And if anyone asks, I advised against it and you ignored my legal counsel." "Deal." Whelan changed lanes, heading east toward Nevada. The rain followed them, turning the desert scrubland into a muddy mess. They drove in silence for an hour, both men lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Gunner spoke. "How bad is it really, the case against me?" Whelan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Bad. On paper, it's bad. You have a criminal record, 3 assault convictions. You're a known member of a motorcycle club that law enforcement considers a criminal enterprise. You were found holding the victim covered in her blood. The witness, the aunt, has given multiple statements saying you attacked them. The media has already convicted you in the court of public opinion. If this goes to trial, we're looking at jury selection. That's going to be a nightmare. Everyone has already seen the news, already made up their minds. But Morrison is a good cop. Old school. He actually cares about the truth more than closing cases. He's been pulling casino surveillance footage, checking bank records, interviewing witnesses. And I think he's starting to see what really happened. The problem is, even if Morrison believes you, the DAA doesn't care. Marcus Thornton has political ambitions. He wants to be Attorney General someday. A high-profile case like this, with a biker and a sympathetic victim, it's a career maker for him. He'll push it to trial even if the evidence is weak. Gunner nodded slowly. He'd seen it before. Politics trumping justice, optics trumping facts. While they drove back at the hospital, something was happening in room 304. It was 2 in the morning, the shift change. The nurses were distracted in the break room, giving reports to the incoming staff, complaining about being short-staffed, talking about their personal lives. Officer Williams, the veteran cop, had left at midnight when his shift ended. The replacement was the young officer, the one who was always on his phone. His name was Daniels, or fresh out of the academy, more interested in scrolling through social media than watching a hospital room door. He stepped away for exactly 90 seconds to use the vending machine down the hall. 90 seconds to buy a Snickers bar and a Coke. Diane Crawford had been waiting in the bare stairwell for 4 hours, watching the patterns, timing the movements, learning the routine. She'd studied the shift changes, learned when the nurses were distracted, learned when the guard was most likely to step away. When she saw her opportunity, she moved fast. She slipped through the ICU doors, her rubber-soled shoes silent on the linoleum. She knew which room. 304, the third door on the left. She pushed it open softly and stepped inside, closing it behind her with barely a click. Emma looked so small in the hospital bed. Too small. Surrounded by machines and monitors and tubes, the ventilator tube down her throat, the IVs in her arms, the catheter, the feeding tube, the monitors tracking every heartbeat, every breath, every tiny fluctuation in her vitals. Diane stood over her niece, and for just a moment, she felt something that might have been guilt. This was Sarah's child, her sister's daughter. Sarah, who had always been the favorite. Sarah, who their parents had loved more. Sarah, who had died in that car crash and left Diane to pick up the pieces. Sarah's dying words echoed in Diane's memory. She'd been in the hospital for 3 hours after the crash before she finally slipped away. Her last words whispered through broken ribs and punctured lungs. "Promise me you'll take care of Emma. Promise me." And Diane had promised, had taken Emma in, had tried in her own way. But the kid was expensive. The kid needed things. The kid looked at her with those judging eyes. "I'm sorry, Emma," Diane whispered, reaching toward the ventilator tube. "But you're just too expensive to keep around, and you're going to ruin everything if you wake up." She didn't know exactly how to do it, didn't know the mechanics of how these machines worked, but she knew that if the air stopped, the heart would stop. And if the heart stopped, it would just be a tragic complication. She succumbed to her injuries, the doctors would say. "We did everything we could. So sad, so young." Her hand wrapped around the plastic tubing of the ventilator. Suddenly the monitor spiked. Emma's heart rate jumped from 60 to 90 beats per minute, then to 100. The alarm would sound in 10 seconds if it stayed elevated. Her closed eyelids fluttered. Not conscious, but the brain responding to oxygen deprivation on some primitive level. Her small hand twitched against the blanket, fingers curling into a fist. Diane gasped and yanked her hand back. She hadn't expected that, hadn't expected any response. The door flew open. A woman in dark blue scrubs stepped in, moving fast. But she wasn't wearing a hospital ID badge. She had hard eyes and tattoos peeking out from under her sleeves. Roses and thorns that ran from her wrists to her elbows. She looked at Diane, then at Diane's hand hovering near the ventilator, and her expression went cold as winter. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, her voice like ice over steel. Diane stammered, trying to put on her victim face, trying to summon tears. I I was just checking on her, adjusting her blanket. I'm her aunt, her legal guardian." "Step away from the bed," the woman said. She moved between Diane and Emma with the practiced efficiency of someone who had seen violence before and wasn't afraid of it. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm the private duty nurse assigned to this case as of 10 minutes ago." "I didn't hire a private nurse," Diane said, her eyes narrowing, her victim mask slipping for just a moment, revealing the calculation underneath. "No," Sarah said, crossing her arms. Her voice carried an edge that suggested she knew exactly what Diane had been about to do. "An anonymous donor did, a very generous donor who wants to make sure Emma gets the best possible care. Around-the-clock observation." I'll be here personally 12 hours a day. My colleague takes the other 12. Emma won't be alone. Not for a second. This is irregular, Diane said, trying to regain control of the situation. I'm her guardian. I should have been consulted. Take it up with hospital administration, Sarah said flatly. But I suggest you leave now, before I call Officer Daniels back from his vending machine run and tell him I caught you tampering with life support equipment. I'm sure the cameras in the hallway will show how you waited for him to leave, how you timed your entry, how you went straight to the ventilator. Diane's face went pale. You can't prove anything. You're making wild accusations. Maybe, Sarah said, but I've been an ICU nurse for 8 years. I know what a concerned relative looks like, and I know what someone with bad intentions looks like. You're the latter. Now leave, or I make a call that ends with you in handcuffs. Diane turned and walked out, trying to maintain dignity, trying not to run, but her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. As she fled down the hallway, she nearly collided with Officer Daniels coming back with his Snickers bar. "Evening, ma'am," he said pleasantly, completely oblivious to what had almost happened. Diane didn't respond. She pushed through the stairwell door and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. A text message from an unknown number. It was a photo, a grainy security camera image of Diane sitting at a slot machine, time-stamped 3:05 a.m. from the night of the attack. The photo showed her hunched over the Emerald Fortune machine, her face illuminated by the flashing lights, her expression twisted in concentration and desperation. The timestamp was damning. It was 10 minutes before she'd claimed she was walking to her car after dinner. The caption below the photo read, "We see you, we know what you did, and we're coming." Diane's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She looked around the empty stairwell, suddenly feeling like she was being watched. Like eyes were on her from every shadow. Somewhere out there, Gunnar and his friends were hunting, gathering evidence, building a case. And Diane realized for the first time since this started that she might not win. That the biker she tried to frame might actually prove his innocence. And if he did, she was going to prison for a very long time. The Whispering Pines mobile home park was exactly the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be found, or when they had nowhere else to go. It was a collection of rusted trailers and overgrown lots, 60 miles outside Las Vegas, connected by dirt roads that turned to impassable mud when it rained. Chain-link fences sagged around properties. Dogs barked from behind them. The air smelled like desert sage and desperation. Gunnar's boots sank into the muck as he walked toward Lot 42. It was a dilapidated single-wide trailer that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. Aluminum foil was taped over the windows, probably to keep the summer heat out and the winter cold out. A broken washing machine sat on the perch next to a rusted barbecue grill that hadn't been used in years. Empty beer cans littered the ground. "Stay in the car," Gunnar told Whelan, who'd parked the SUV at the entrance to the park. "Gunnar, if this goes south, I can't help you," Whelan warned, checking his watch. It was 4 in the afternoon. They'd been driving for 3 hours. "Your bail hearing is in 2 days. You catch another assault charge, any charge, and it's over. They revoke bail, you go back in, and this time you stay in until trial, which could be 6 months or more." "I'm just going to talk," Gunnar said. He didn't mention the brass knuckles in his jacket pocket, just in case. Old habits from his enforcer days. "That's what you said last time," Whelan muttered, but he stayed in the car. Gunnar walked up to the trailer and pounded on the flimsy metal door. Bang, bang, bang. The whole structure shook with each impact. "Go away," a voice slurred from inside. Male. Drunk or high or both. "I ain't buying nothing. I don't have any money." "Kyle Crawford," Gunnar shouted. "Open up. It's about Diane." Silence. Then the sound of shuffling, a deadbolt sliding back. The door creaked open, slowly revealing a man who looked like he'd lived 3 hard lifetimes in 40 years. Kyle Crawford was gaunt with yellow-tinged skin that suggested liver problems. His eyes swam in a pool of cheap whiskey and regret. He wore a stained tank top that might have been white once, but was now a grayish-brown. He held a shotgun loosely in one hand, barrel pointed at the ground, but the threat was clear. "Diane sent you to kill me?" Kyle asked, squinting into the late afternoon sun. His voice carried the resignation of a man who'd been expecting this conversation for a long time. She didn't send me, Gunnar said, stepping onto the porch carefully, hands visible, non-threatening. I'm the guy she's trying to frame for putting her niece in a coma. Kyle's eyes widened in recognition. He lowered the shotgun slightly. You're the biker from the news, the one they're saying attacked them. Yeah, can I come in? Kyle hesitated, then stepped back. Why not? Everyone else wants me dead. Might as well add bikers to the list. The trailer smelled of mold and stale beer and cigarettes and unwashed laundry. Gunnar had to duck to avoid hitting his head on the low ceiling. The interior was worse than the exterior. Trash everywhere. Dishes piled in the sink. The carpet was stained with things Gunnar didn't want to think about. A small TV in the corner played a game show with the sound off. I saw her on TV this morning, Kyle muttered, falling onto a torn sofa that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster. Acting like Mother Teresa, like she's some kind of saint, like she actually cares about that kid, makes me sick, makes me want to drink more. You said you have videos, Gunnar said, cutting straight to the point. Time was precious. Every hour that passed was another hour Diane could work her magic, spin her story, lock him away. Videos that show who she really is. Kyle laughed, a wet hacking sound that turned into a coughing fit. When it subsided, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I got more than videos, man. I got scars. He pulled up his shirt, revealing a jagged keloid scar running down his ribs, maybe 6 inches long. The kind of scar that comes from a deep knife wound. See this? She came at me with a steak knife from the kitchen. Serrated, because I bought the wrong brand of cigarettes. Not Virginia Slims. I got Marlboros because they were on sale. And she lost her mind. Stabbed me while I was sleeping. Gunnar stared at the scar. He'd seen knife wounds before. This one had needed stitches. Maybe 20 of them. You go to the hospital. Yeah, told them I fell on a broken bottle. Didn't want to admit my wife tried to kill me. What kind of man admits that? Kyle pulled his shirt back down. That woman, she's got a demon in her. A gambling demon. When she loses, she needs to hurt someone. Needs to blame someone. Usually that someone was me. Until I finally got smart and filed for divorce. I need that proof, Kyle, Gunnar said, sitting down on a folding chair that looked like it might collapse under his weight. She beat a 6-year-old girl half to death because she lost $1,800 at slots. Put her in a coma. If I don't get that proof, she walks. And the kid Emma, she goes back to her. And next time Diane will finish what she started. Kyle rubbed his face with both hands. They were shaking. DTTS probably. She'll kill me if she finds out I talk to you. She knows people. Dangerous people. Guys who collect debts. Guys who make problems disappear. I'm a Hell's Angel, Kyle. Gunnar said, his voice dropping to a low rumble that filled the small space. Actually Iron Horseman, but same difference. You think the people she knows are dangerous? You haven't met my brothers. 300 members across 5 states. We take care of our own. And right now you're about to become one of our own. You give me that evidence and nobody touches you. I give you my word, the club's word, and we keep our word. Kyle looked at Gunnar, really looked at him. Saw the seriousness in those steel gray eyes. Saw violence, yes, barely restrained under the surface. But also something else. Protection. A code. Honor in its own brutal way. Kyle stood up unsteadily and walked to a section of wall where a poster of a Budweiser girl hung. He pulled it aside, revealing a hollow section where the drywall had been removed. He reached in and pulled out an old USB drive, the kind you could buy at Walmart for $10. She didn't know I recorded the fights, Kyle whispered, turning the drive over in his hands. I set up a nanny cam back when we talked about having kids. Hidden camera and a teddy bear. I wanted to see if she was using drugs again. Catch her so I could get her help. Instead, I caught everything. What's on it? Everything, her screaming at me, throwing things, breaking plates, glasses, the TV. There's footage of her smashing a lamp against the wall because her lottery ticket didn't win. There's footage of her punching herself in the face and then calling the cops on me saying I hit her. There's footage of, Kyle's voice cracked. There's footage from 3 years ago, before the divorce. We had a neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, nice old lady. She asked Diane to watch her grandson for an afternoon. Kid was maybe 4 years old. Tommy was his name. What happened? Just watch it. Kyle said, his hands shaking as he held out the USB drive. I can't watch it again. I can't. I should have done something then. Should have called someone. But I was scared. I was drunk. I was a coward. And I've had to live with that every day since. Gunnar took the drive carefully like it was evidence at a crime scene, which it was. What happened to the kid, Tommy? I don't know. The grandma took him home that evening. He had a bruise on his face. Diane said he fell. The grandma believed her. Or maybe she didn't want to believe what she suspected. People don't want to see evil, you know. Easier to look away. Gunnar pocketed the drive. He pulled out a thick envelope from his jacket. $5,000 in cash. The club had taken up a collection. Every member had kicked in. For Lily, they'd said. For the little girl who needs help. Get out of town, Kyle, Gunnar said, tossing the envelope onto the couch. It landed with a heavy thump. Tonight, pack a bag, drive to Arizona, or Texas, or California, anywhere but here. Get sober. Find a meeting. AA is everywhere. Get help. And when this is over, when she's in prison, maybe you can sleep at night knowing you did one right thing, one brave thing. Kyle stared at the money like it was $1,000,000, which to him it might as well have been. Tears started running down his weathered face, cutting tracks through the grime. I was so scared of her. For so long. 5 years of marriage felt like 20. Every day wondering if this was the day she'd kill me. You're not scared anymore, Gunnar said, standing. The chair creaked in relief. You're free, but Kyle, yeah, if you take that money and spend it on booze or drugs, if you waste this chance, I'll be disappointed. And you don't want to disappoint me. Understand? Kyle nodded quickly. I understand. I'll leave tonight, I swear. As Gunnar walked back to the SUV, the USB drive felt heavy in his pocket. Heavier than it should. It was evidence. It was truth. It was Emma's only chance. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Mitchell, the nurse at the hospital. The text read, "She's awake. Emma woke up 20 minutes ago. She's confused and scared. Diane tried to visit, but I blocked her. Doctors say she might be able to give a statement soon. Move fast." Gunnar's heart stopped. Then it started pounding double time. Emma was awake, which meant the clock was ticking. Diane would know by now. Would know that her window to control the narrative was closing. Would know that Emma might talk. Gunnar climbed into the SUV. Drive fast, she's awake. Whelan didn't ask questions, he just floored it. The waking world was too bright and too loud and too painful. Emma Grace's eyes opened slowly like rusty shutters being lifted for the first time in forever. The lights overhead hummed with a painful intensity that made her head throb. Everything hurt. Her head felt like it was full of broken glass. Her throat was raw and dry, burning like she'd swallowed sandpaper. Her chest ached with every breath. Emma, sweetheart, can you hear me? A man in a white coat was leaning over her, shining a light into her eyes. The light felt like needles. She tried to speak, but her throat wouldn't work properly. Something had been inside it. Something that tasted like plastic and blood and medicine. Water, she croaked. The word came out as barely a whisper. Here, honey, a gentle voice said. A woman appeared holding a cup with a straw. The woman had kind eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Emma drank greedily, the cool water soothing the fire in her throat. Memories began to flash in her mind like a broken movie reel. Fragments, pieces, the slot machines with their flashing lights, the cold car, the rain on the windows, the screaming, the boots, the pain, so much pain. Emma started to cry. The monitor beside her bed began beeping faster. Beep, 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 faster and faster. It's okay, the doctor said, his voice gentle. You're safe. You're at St. Michael's Hospital. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay. You're healing. Not accident, Emma thought. The word was clear in her mind, even if she couldn't say it yet. Not accident. Aunt Diane hurt me. The door burst open. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Oh, thank God, my baby, you're awake. Diane rushed in, pushing past the doctor with practiced urgency. She looked haggard with dark circles under her eyes that had been carefully applied with makeup to look like genuine exhaustion. Her hair was perfectly disheveled. She wore the same black dress from the news interviews. Emma flinched. Her entire small body went rigid against the mattress. Every muscle tensed. Her breath came faster. The heart monitor spiked dangerously. 100 beats per minute. 120. 140. Mrs. Crawford, please, the doctor warned, stepping between Diane and the bed. She's in distress. Her heart rate is dangerous. You need to step back. She needs her family, Diane cried, her voice loud enough to carry into the hallway where nurses were passing. Loud enough to sound concerned. I'm all she has in this world. Let me comfort her. But Emma saw the look in Diane's eyes. Behind the tears and the concern was something cold, something calculating. And Emma knew that Diane wasn't here to comfort her. Diane was here to make sure Emma didn't tell. Diane managed to push past the doctor and grabbed Emma's hand. To anyone watching, it looked like a loving aunt desperately trying to comfort her traumatized niece. But Diane's grip was tight, too tight. Her fingernails dug into Emma's wrist hard enough to leave marks, the same wrist that was still bruised from the attack. Diane leaned close, her face inches from Emma's. Her breath smelled like coffee and cigarettes. Her voice dropped to a whisper that only Emma could hear. Emma, Diane whispered urgently, you're awake. Thank God you're awake. You're safe now, sweetheart. The bad man can't hurt you anymore. Emma stared at her aunt, paralyzed by fear, unable to move, unable to speak. The police caught him. Diane continued, her voice still a whisper, her fingernails digging deeper into Emma's wrist. The biker. The big scary man on the motorcycle. Remember, he attacked us in the parking lot. He hurt you so badly. But I saved you. I fought him off. I saved my precious niece. Emma's lip began to tremble. Fresh tears rolled down her swollen cheeks. But you need to remember correctly, sweetheart, Diane said, and now there was steel in her whisper, a threat barely hidden. You need to tell the doctors the truth. Tell them the biker hurt you. Tell them I saved you. Tell them I'm a good aunt who loves you very much. Can you do that for me? Emma looked at the doctor, then back at Diane. The threat was clear in her aunt's eyes and the pressure of her fingers cutting off circulation to Emma's hand. Say the wrong thing and I'll finish what I started. Say the wrong thing and you'll have another accident. A fatal one this time. Emma stammered, her voice weak and terrified. I don't remember very well. Yes, you do, Diane pressed, her whisper becoming more urgent, more desperate. The biker. The man with the beard and the leather vest. He grabbed you, he hit you, he hurt you. Say it. Tell the doctor. Mrs. Crawford, that's enough, the doctor ordered firmly. He'd been watching the monitors, watching Emma's vitals spike to dangerous levels. You need to leave now. You're causing her severe distress. But I'm her aunt, Diane shrieked, finally letting go of Emma's wrist. She stood up, putting on her victim face for the doctor and the nurses who were now gathering in the doorway. I have a right to see my niece. I'm her legal guardian. You can't keep me away from her. We can and we will if you continue to agitate the patient, the doctor said firmly. I'm calling security. You need to leave, now. But the damage was already done. The seed was planted. Emma closed her eyes and turned her face to the wall, silent sobs shaking her small body. She was 6 years old, alone, terrified, and the monster was still hunting her even in the hospital that was supposed to keep her safe. As Diane was escorted out of the room by security, she managed to lean close to Emma one more time. Remember what I said, sweetheart? Tell them the truth, the right truth, or there will be consequences. Down the hall, Sarah Mitchell had been watching the whole thing on a security monitor she'd had installed in the nurse's station. She'd seen everything. The way Diane grabbed Emma's wrist, the way she leaned in close, the way Emma's vitals had spiked the moment Diane entered the room, the way fear had flooded the little girl's face. Sarah pulled out her phone and sent a text to Gunnar. The message was simple but urgent. She's terrified. Diane got to her first, threatened her while Doctor was in the room. Emma, too scared to speak. We're running out of time. Diane will try again. Then Sarah made another call, to Detective Morrison. It was time to tell him what she'd seen, what she knew, before Diane found another way to silence Emma forever. 2 days later, the county courthouse was packed for Gunnar's preliminary hearing. What should have been a routine proceeding had turned into a media circus. News vans lined the streets for 3 blocks. Protesters held signs on both sides of the courthouse steps. On the left, 50 or 60 women holding signs, "Believe survivors," and "Lock up the monster," and "Justice for Emma," and "Bikers or thugs." On the right, a smaller but more intimidating group. Veterans in leather vests, many of them wearing their old military patches alongside their motorcycle club colors. Iron Horseman members standing silent and disciplined. They held signs that read, "Marines don't lie and protect the innocent," and "Truth over politics." Inside courtroom 4B, the air was thick with tension and the smell of too many people packed into too small a space. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. News cameras lined the back, their red recording lights glowing like demon eyes. Gunner sat at the defense table wearing a suit that James Whelan had bought him at Men's Warehouse the day before. It was 2 sizes too small for his broad shoulders, making him look even more massive, even more like a caged animal. The collar was tight around his thick neck. The sleeves were too short, showing his tattooed wrists. He looked deeply uncomfortable, like a bear forced into a tuxedo. Across the aisle, District Attorney Marcus Thornton looked confident, polished. He wore an expensive suit that fit perfectly. His hair was styled. He had the sympathy vote sewn up. He had a tearful aunt sitting in the front row dabbing at her eyes with tissues. He had a victim who was too traumatized to speak clearly, but whose injuries spoke volumes. He had public opinion on his side. Every poll showed that 87% of the city believed Gunner was guilty. This case was going to make Thornton's career. Attorney General Thornton had a nice ring to it. Maybe even Governor Thornton someday. "Your Honor," Thornton began his opening statement after Judge Helen Waverly called the court to order. He paced in front of the jury box like a professor giving a lecture. "This is a case about brutality, pure and simple, about a man who has spent his entire adult life operating outside the law, outside the boundaries of civilized society. A man with 3 prior convictions for violent assault. A man who belongs to a criminal organization that traffics in drugs, weapons, and violence." Thornton pointed dramatically at Gunner. The defendant, Marcus Callahan, also known as Gunner, saw an opportunity on the night of March 15th. He saw a vulnerable woman and her innocent niece walking to their car after a pleasant dinner at the casino, and he decided to rob them. When the child screamed, when 6-year-old Emma Wilson cried out in terror, he silenced her with his fists, with his boots, with brutal, sustained violence that left her with a fractured skull, broken ribs, internal bleeding, and injuries so severe that doctors didn't think she would survive. The jury was listening intently. Several members were already looking at Gunner with disgust. "We have witnesses who placed him at the scene covered in the victim's blood," Thornton continued. "We have medical evidence of severe trauma consistent with an adult male beating a small child. We have the testimony of Diane Crawford, the aunt who tried desperately to save her niece from this monster. Ladies and gentlemen, this man is a menace to society, and we intend to prove it beyond any shadow of doubt." Thornton sat down looking satisfied. Judge Waverly, a stern woman in her late 60s with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, looked at the defense table. "Mr. Whelan, would you like to make an opening statement?" Whelan stood up, but unlike Thornton, he didn't pace, he didn't gesture dramatically. He stood still in front of the jury box, his hands clasped in front of him, his voice calm and measured. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Whelan said, "the prosecution has just told you a story. It's a compelling story. It has all the elements of a good narrative, a villain, a victim, a hero who saves the day. But ladies and gentlemen, a story isn't the same as truth. And the truth of what happened on March 15th is very different from what Mr. Thornton just described." Whelan paused, letting that sink in. "The truth is found not in dramatic accusations, but in evidence, in facts, in timelines, in security footage, in bank records, in witness statements that can be verified or disproven. And when you examine the actual evidence in this case, you will find that it doesn't just raise reasonable doubt about my client's guilt. It proves his innocence. And more than that, it points directly at the real perpetrator of this crime." Several jury members sat up straighter, suddenly interested. "My client, Marcus Callahan, is not a perfect man," Whelan continued. "He has made mistakes in his life. He has a criminal record. But on the night of March 15th, he did something extraordinary, something heroic. He saved a little girl's life. And for that act of courage, of basic human decency, He has been arrested, vilified, and accused of the very crime he prevented. Whelan looked each jury member in the eye. Over the course of this trial, we will present evidence that will shock you. That will make you question everything you think you know about this case. We will show you security footage, bank records, medical evidence, witness testimony, and we will prove that Marcus Callahan is innocent. Thank you. Whelan sat down. The courtroom was buzzing with whispers. The trial moved through its opening phases over the next 3 days. The prosecution called witnesses, systematically building their case piece by piece. They called paramedic Jason Torres, who testified about Emma's horrific injuries. In 12 years as a paramedic, I've never seen a child so badly beaten and still alive. Torres said, his voice shaking slightly. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe head trauma. It was a miracle she survived the ambulance ride. On cross-examination, Whelan asked one simple question. Did you see my client inflict these injuries? Well, no, Torres admitted, but he was holding her, covered in blood. So you didn't witness the assault itself? No. Thank you, no further questions. They called Dr. Patricia Hayes, who showed x-rays of fractured bones, CT scans of the brain's swelling, photographs of bruises and lacerations that made several jury members look away in disgust. Again, Whelan's cross-examination was brief. Doctor, Hayes, based on your medical expertise, can you tell us the identity of the person who inflicted these injuries? Well, no, I can tell you the injuries were inflicted by an adult based on the force required and the size of the contusions, but I can't identify who specifically. So my client could have inflicted them, or someone else could have, theoretically, yes. Thank you, doctor. They called security guard Carl, who testified about seeing Gunnar carry Emma into the casino, blood everywhere. He looked crazy, Carl said, wild-eyed, dangerous, like he might hurt someone else. On cross-examination, Whelan asked, Mr. Carl, did you actually see my client strike Emma Wilson? No. Did you see him do anything except try to get her medical help as quickly as possible? Carl hesitated. Well, no. He did tell me to call 911 pretty urgently. In fact, he demanded you call for help immediately, didn't he? Said she would die if the ambulance didn't arrive within 5 minutes. Yes, he said that. Does that sound like someone who had just beaten a child and was trying to cover it up? I guess not when you put it that way. No further questions. By day 3 of testimony, the prosecution's case was starting to show cracks. But Thornton still had his ace in the hole. He still had Diane Crawford. And on the afternoon of day 3, he called her to the stand. The courtroom went silent as Diane walked to the witness stand. She had perfected her look. Conservative navy dress, minimal makeup, hair pulled back simply. She looked like a grieving guardian, not a monster. She looked like someone you'd want to help, to protect, to believe. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Miss Crawford, Thornton began gently, like he was talking to a frightened child. I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell the jury about the night of March 15th. Take your time. Diane took a shaky breath. She'd rehearsed this moment for weeks with Victor Brennan, her lawyer. Every word, every pause, every tear. Emma and I had gone to the Golden Crown Casino for dinner. She began, her voice trembling perfectly. I know it seems like an unusual place to take a child, but we don't have a lot of money. Their buffet was affordable, and Emma loved the desserts they had, the chocolate cake especially. It was one of the few things that made her smile after losing her parents. Several jury members nodded sympathetically. We ate around 8 p.m., Diane continued. It was nice. We talked about school, about her friends. She seemed happy. After dinner, she wanted to see the casino. She'd never been inside one before. She was fascinated by all the lights and sounds. So we walked around for a little while. I played a few games, slot machines, just for fun, maybe 20 minutes total. Then we headed back to the car. Whelan scribbled a note. The buffet closed at 7 p.m. on weekdays. The slot machine records showed 4.5 hours of continuous play. What time was it when you left the casino? Thornton asked. Around 3 in the morning. I know that's late. Too late for a child to be awake. I made a mistake there. I admit it. I lost track of time. I'm not a perfect guardian, but I was trying to give her a nice evening. One good memory. What happened when you left the casino? We were walking to our car in the parking lot when I heard a motorcycle engine, very loud. aggressive. Then this man appeared out of nowhere. She pointed at Gunnar, her hands shaking. He was huge, terrifying, all in leather with those awful patches, a skull on his vest. What did he do? He demanded money, said, "Give me your purse or I'll hurt the kid." I told him I didn't have much money, that we'd spent most of it on dinner. But he didn't believe me. He got angrier. Emma got scared and screamed. And that's when Diane broke down sobbing. Perfect tears at the perfect moment. Thornton handed her a tissue. "Take your time, Miss Crawford." Diane dabbed at her eyes. He grabbed Emma, just snatched her right out of my hands, and he threw her down on the pavement. Just threw her like she was nothing. And then he started hitting her, punching her, kicking her. I tried to stop him. I screamed for help. I hit him, scratched him, tried everything I could think of. But he was too strong, too big. He kept saying, "Shut that kid up," and hitting her. I thought he was going to kill her. I really did. The jury was transfixed. Two women in the jury box were openly crying. One older man looked at Gunnar with pure hatred. Gunnar sat perfectly still at the defense table, his face expressionless. But under the table, his hands were clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. A vein pulsed in his temple. "Thank you, Miss Crawford," Thornton said softly. "I know that was difficult. Your witness, Mr. Whelan." Judge Waverly looked at the defense table. "Mr. Whelan." Whelan stood up slowly. He didn't rush. He took his time gathering his papers, organizing them on the podium, making Diane wait, making her nervous. The longer the silence stretched, the more Diane shifted in her seat. "Miss Crawford," Whelan finally said, his voice pleasant and conversational, "you testified that you had dinner at the casino buffet around 8 p.m., correct?" "Yes." "And then you walked around the casino for a bit, played a few slot machines for maybe 20 minutes, and then left around 3 a.m. Is that your testimony?" "Yes." "That's interesting," Whelan said, clicking a remote control. A large screen descended from the ceiling behind the judge's bench. "Because the casino provided us with complete surveillance footage and their internal gaming records. And those records tell a very different story." The screen lit up with a spreadsheet showing timestamps and transaction records. "This is the activity log for slot machine number 247, the one called Emerald Fortune. According to the seized records, this machine had continuous play from 10:28 p.m. on March 14th until 3:05 a.m. on March 15th. That's 4 hours and 37 minutes of continuous play. Not 20 minutes, 4.5 hours. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The player card registered to this machine during that time period was card number 478923, which is registered to you, Miss Crawford. Your name, your social security number, your card." Diane's face went pale. I must have been confused about the timing. It's been stressful. My memory isn't perfect." "Your memory isn't perfect," Whelan repeated. "Were you also confused when you said you had dinner at 8 p.m. because the casino buffet closes at 7 p.m. on weekdays?" "We have that in writing from the casino manager." "We must have eaten earlier then. 7 p.m. I got confused." "I see. And where was Emma during those 4.5 hours while you were at the slot machine?" "She was with me, sitting next to me." "Really?" Whelan clicked the remote again. Casino footage appeared on the screen showing Diane entering the gaming floor alone at 10:28 p.m. The timestamp was clear in the corner. "Here you are entering the gaming area at 10:28 p.m. I don't see Emma. Do you see Emma anywhere in this footage, Miss Crawford?" Diane squinted at the screen. "She must have been just off camera." "Must have been," Whelan said. Another click. Parking lot footage appeared showing a car in the distance. The timestamp read 10:35 p.m. This is footage from the parking lot camera at 10:35 p.m. That's your Honda Civic license plate, 7KJF892, correct? Nay. Yes. And do you see that shape in the back seat? The security team enhanced the footage. The image zoomed in. Through the fogged window, a small figure was barely visible. "That's Emma, alone in your car, in 40-degree weather, while you were inside gambling." The whispers grew louder. Several jury members were leaning forward, suddenly very interested. You left a 6-year-old child alone in a car in a casino parking lot for 4.5 hours while you gambled. Didn't you, Miss Crawford? Whelan's voice was sharp now, cutting through her facade like a knife. I checked on her, Diane yelled, losing her composure. I went out to check on her. The surveillance footage shows you never left that slot machine. Not once. You didn't check on her. You abandoned her while you fed your gambling addiction. Objection. Thornton was on his feet. Relevance. This is an assault trial, not a parenting evaluation. It goes directly to the credibility and motive, Your Honor, Whelan countered. It explains what happened when this witness finally walked out to that car after losing all her money. Overruled, Judge Waverly said. Answer the question, Miss Crawford. Diane was sweating now. Her carefully applied makeup was starting to run. I was trying to win money for us, to pay rent, to buy Emma things she needed. I was trying to be a good aunt. How much money did you lose that night? Diane was silent. Your Honor, may I approach the witness? Whelan walked to the witness stand and handed Diane a stack of bank records. These are your bank records, subpoenaed by the defense. Please read the highlighted section for the jury. Diane's hands shook as she looked at the paper. $1,800. $1,800. Your rent money according to your landlord's testimony. Your grocery money. Emma's school lunch account. All of it lost at the slot machines. How did that make you feel when you walked out to that car at 3:05 in the morning and realized what you'd done? I was upset. Upset enough to take it out on a 6-year-old child. No, Diane screamed. I didn't hurt her. He did. The biker did it. Then let's talk about what really happened, Whelan said, turning to the screen. Let's listen to what you actually said in that parking lot. He played enhanced audio from the casino surveillance system. The quality was surprisingly clear. Diane's voice echoed through the courtroom, caught by external security microphones. You cursed me. This is your fault. You ruined everything. I should never have taken you in. The sound of a slap. A child crying, shut up, shut your mouth. The sound of impact. Again. The jury sat in stunned silence. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Those are your words, Miss Crawford, Whelan said. Not Marcus Callahan's, yours. You blamed Emma for your gambling losses, for your failures, and you took your rage out on her. That's out of context, Diane stammered. You're twisting things. Am I? Then let's talk about your history. Let's talk about patterns of behavior. Whelan produced another remote. The defense would like to introduce Exhibit D video evidence provided by Kyle Crawford, the witness's ex-husband. Objection. Thornton was on his feet, his confidence finally cracking. Prejudicial. This is character assassination. It establishes a pattern of violent behavior, Your Honor, Whelan countered. It's directly relevant to whether this witness is credible and whether she's capable of the violence inflicted on Emma Wilson. Judge Waverly considered for a moment. I'll allow it, but keep it brief, Mr. Whelan. The screen changed. Grainy nanny cam footage appeared showing a different living room. The date stamp read 3 years earlier. Diane was visible younger but recognizable, screaming at someone off camera. A child's voice could be heard crying, the video Diane. Shut up, shut your mouth right now, or I swear to God I'll give you something to really cry about. The sound of a slap, a child crying harder. That's right, cry. See what happens when you make me angry. Several jury members gasped audibly. One woman put her hand over her mouth. That was your neighbor's child you were babysitting 3 years ago, wasn't it? Whelan asked. 4-year-old Tommy Henderson. Diane's face crumpled. All the careful composure gone. That was a long time ago. I was stressed. I was going through a hard time. I got help. I went to anger management. Did you wear when? Because we found no record of you attending any anger management program, Miss Crawford. Diane had no answer. And the violence didn't stop there, did it? Whelan produced more documents. Hospital records show that Emma Wilson visited the emergency room twice in the 6 months she lived with you before the attack. Once in October for a fall down the stairs that resulted in a sprained wrist and bruising. Once in January for running into a door that gave her a black eye and a split lip. CPS was called both times. Did you get help then, Miss Crawford? Or did you just get better at hiding the abuse? Those were accidents. Diane's voice was rising, panic setting in. Kids fall. Kids are clumsy. You can't prove I hurt her. Can I? Whelan turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the evidence. The timeline that proves Miss Crawford left Emma alone for hours. The audio of her screaming at the child blaming her for gambling losses. The video showing her history of violence. The hospital visits that raised red flags. He turned back to Diane. Miss Crawford, after the attack, you set up a GoFundMe account called Emma's Recovery Fund, correct? Yes, Diane said quietly, for her medical bills, to help with her recovery. How much has that account raised? I don't know exactly. $47,000, Whelan said. And according to bank records we subpoenaed, how much of that have you spent on Emma's actual medical care, which is covered by state insurance for foster children? Diane was silent, her face going white. Let me tell you, Whelan continued, $0 on medical care. But you did spend $18,000 on a new Nissan Sentra, $3,000 on clothes and jewelry, $5,000 paying off gambling debts to a loan shark named Tony Messina. You've been using your niece's suffering, her pain, her near death to fund your lifestyle, haven't you? I needed those things, Diane screamed, standing up from the witness chair. All pretense gone, all the careful victim persona shattered. I needed a car that worked. I needed to pay off my debts. Everything I did was trying to take care of her, but she ruined my life. Don't you understand? Everything was fine until she showed up. The courtroom exploded in shocked whispers. Miss Crawford, sit down, Judge Waverly ordered, banging her gavel, but Diane was unraveling 3 weeks of pressure and lies finally breaking through. Years of rage spilling out in front of everyone. She ruined everything, Diane continued, tears streaming down her face now. Real tears, tears of self-pity and rage. I never wanted her. My sister dumped her on me and died. Left me with this burden. Every bet I lose, every bill I can't pay, every problem in my life. It's because of her. She's bad luck. She's cursed. I'm the victim. Here, I'm the one who suffered. Sit down or I'll hold you in contempt, Judge Waverly roared. Diane finally collapsed back into the witness chair, her chest heaving, mascara running down her face in black streams. She looked around the courtroom and saw the horror on every face, saw the disgust, saw that she'd just destroyed herself. Whelan's voice was quiet now, deadly calm. No further questions, Your Honor. The prosecution tried to rehabilitate their witness during redirect examination, but the damage was catastrophic and irreversible. The jury had seen the real Diane Crawford. The mask had fallen, and they were horrified. Court adjourned for the day. As Diane was escorted out by her lawyer, Victor Brennan, who looked like he wanted to quit on the spot, she caught sight of herself in the reflection of the courtroom windows. She barely recognized the wild-eyed woman staring back. Outside the courthouse, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Another text from the unknown number. A photo. Diane leaving St. Michael's Hospital at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago. The timestamp matched exactly when Sarah Mitchell had caught her near Emma's ventilator about to pull the tube. The message read, "We have everything, every lie, every crime. Run while you still can. They're coming for you." Diane's hands shook so badly she dropped the phone. It clattered on the courthouse steps. She looked around wildly, feeling like she was being watched from every shadow, every window, every parked car. Somewhere out there, Gunnar and his brothers were hunting, and they had her trapped. The next morning, the defense began presenting its case. The courtroom was even more packed than before, if that was possible. News of Diane's meltdown had spread. The video had gone viral. Public opinion was shifting. Whelan called witness after witness, methodically building a case that wasn't just about reasonable doubt. It was about proving innocence and exposing the truth. He called Kyle Crawford, who took the stand looking sober for the first time in years. Kyle testified about 5 years of marriage to Diane, about the gambling addiction that consumed her, about the violence that escalated over time. She came at me with a knife, Kyle said, lifting his shirt to show the scar to the jury. Stabbed me while I was sleeping because I bought the wrong brand of cigarettes. Marlboros instead of Virginia Slims, 6 inches deep, 48 stitches. I told the ER I fell on a broken bottle because I was ashamed to admit my wife tried to kill me. On cross-examination, Thornton tried to discredit him. Mr. Crawford, you're an alcoholic, aren't you? You've been drinking heavily since your divorce. I was an alcoholic, Kyle corrected. I'm 3 weeks sober as of yesterday, attending meetings every day. And yes, I drank to forget what that woman did to me, to forget that I was too scared to stop her for 5 years. So your memory of events from years ago might not be reliable? My memory is perfectly clear, Mr. Thornton. And I have video evidence to back it up. Would you like to see more footage of what she's capable of? Thornton backed off quickly. Whelan called Mrs. Henderson the elderly neighbor from Diane's apartment building. She testified about hearing screaming from Diane's apartment on a weekly basis. I called CPS twice. Mrs. Henderson said, her voice shaking with emotion. I heard that poor child crying, heard Diane screaming at her. Once I heard what sounded like furniture breaking, but CPS said they investigated and found nothing. Said Diane was cooperative and the apartment was clean and Emma seemed fine. But I knew something was wrong. I should have done more. It's not your fault, Mrs. Henderson, Whelan said gently. You did what you could. The system failed Emma, not you. He called Dr. Nina Rothman, the child psychologist who had been working with Emma since she woke up. Emma has severe PTSD, Dr. Rothman testified. She has nightmares, panic attacks. She's terrified of women with blonde hair like her aunt. She's terrified of the color navy blue because that's what her aunt wore. But here's what's significant. When I showed her photos of different people, including Mr. Callahan, and asked her to identify who hurt her, she immediately pointed to Diane Crawford, without hesitation. And when I asked who saved her, she pointed to Mr. Callahan and called him the Bear Angel. She drew pictures during our therapy sessions. Dr. Rothman continued producing several drawings. This one shows her aunt as a monster with red eyes and sharp teeth. This one shows a large man with a beard and wings carrying her to safety. Children don't lie in their art. They can't. It's too pure, too honest. Whelan displayed the drawings for the jury. Several members were visibly moved. He called Tommy Wrench Hayes the grizzled Iron Horseman member. Wrench was 52 with a weathered face and hands scarred from decades of motorcycle mechanics. He took the stand wearing his dress uniform, the one with his Vietnam service patches. I've known Gunnar for 12 years, Wrench said, his voice rough with emotion. And I need you to understand something about him, about who he really is. Tell us, Mr. Hayes, Whelan prompted. I lost my grandson 3 years ago, Wrench said. The courtroom went silent. Little boy named Cody. He was 5 years old. His mother's boyfriend beat him to death over a broken toy truck. And you know what the sister did? Gave that monster 10 years. 10 years for killing a child. For killing my world. Wrench's voice broke. He wiped his eyes. When Gunnar heard what happened, he sat with me for 3 days straight. Didn't leave my side. I was drinking myself to death, had my service pistol loaded, was ready to eat a bullet. And Gunnar, this man you're calling a monster, he held me while I cried. He took the gun away. He saved my life. And what do you know about Mr. Callahan's character regarding children? Gunnar has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met, Wrench said firmly. He protects kids. He doesn't hurt them. After we lost Cody, Gunnar started volunteering, reading to kids at the children's hospital, donating to child abuse charities. He does it quietly, doesn't want recognition. But I've seen it. I know who he is. And the man I know would never ever hurt a child. He'd die first. The jury was listening intently. Several members were crying. On cross-examination, Thornton tried to attack. Mr. Hayes, you're a member of the same motorcycle club as Mr. Callahan. You have a vested interest in protecting him, don't you? I have an interest in truth, Wrench said. And the truth is that Gunnar saved that little girl's life, just like he saved mine. But the moment everyone had been waiting for came on day 6 of the trial, the moment that would decide everything. Your Honor, Whelan said, standing. The defense would like to present testimony from Emma Grace Wilson via video link from St. Michael's Hospital. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. This was it. The little girl who had been at the center of this storm from the beginning, the only person who truly knew what happened that night. Thornton stood up. Your Honor, we object. The child is 6 years old and has suffered severe trauma. Her testimony cannot be considered reliable. She's been coached, she's on medications, she's been influenced by the defense team. Your Honor, Whelan countered, Emma Wilson is the victim in this case. She has every right to tell her story, and Dr. Rothman has evaluated her and determined she is competent to testify and has clear memories of the events. The prosecution doesn't want her to testify because they know what she'll say. They know she'll tell the truth that destroys their narrative. Judge Waverly considered for a long moment. I'll allow it. But Dr. Rothman will be present and will proceed with sensitivity to the child's condition. Bailiff set up the video feed. A large screen was wheeled in, positioned where everyone in the courtroom could see. The feed connected, showing a hospital room. Emma sat in a hospital bed, no longer in ICU, but in a regular pediatric room. She wore a pink hospital gown with cartoon characters on it. Her face still showed fading bruises, yellow and green now, instead of purple and black. Her left arm was in a kicked. Sarah Mitchell sat beside her, holding her hand. Dr. Rothman sat on the other side. Emma, Judge Waverly said gently, her stern courtroom voice softening. Can you hear us, sweetheart? Emma nodded, her eyes wide as she looked at all the people on the monitor in her hospital room. She looked small, fragile, scared. You're very brave for talking to us today, Emma. Do you know why we're here? To find out what happened, Emma said in a small, quiet voice that barely carried through the speakers. To find out who hurt me. That's right, Emma, I need you to look at the screen. Do you see the people in the courtroom? The camera on the monitor in Emma's room panned slowly across the courtroom, past the crowded gallery, past the jury box, past the prosecution table where Thornton sat rigid, past Diane, who was sitting in the front row of the gallery, her face white as paper. Then the camera landed on Gunner at the defense table. He had removed his sunglasses. His gray eyes, usually so hard and guarded, were soft now, vulnerable, afraid. He looked at Emma through the screen, and she could see his lips move even though she couldn't hear him. It's okay, little bit. I'm right here. You're safe. Emma saw him. Recognition flooded her face. Fear melted away, slightly replaced by something that looked like relief. She smiled, just a tiny smile, the first one anyone had seen since the attack. Emma, Judge Waverly asked gently, can you tell us what you remember about that night, about March 15th? Take your time. There's no rush. Emma took a shaky breath. Sarah squeezed her hand encouragingly. Dr. Rothman nodded. Aunt Diane took me to the casino. Emma began, her voice small but surprisingly clear. She said we were going to have dinner, but we didn't eat. Not really. She left me in the car. How long were you in the car, sweetheart? I don't know, a really long time. I counted raindrops. I counted to 1,000, then I counted again. It was cold. I was so hungry. My tummy hurt really bad. I wanted to go home, but Aunt Diane was inside. What happened when Aunt Diane came back? Emma's lip began to tremble. Fresh tears welled in her eyes. She was really, really angry. Angrier than I'd ever seen her. Her eyes looked scary, like she wasn't my aunt anymore, like she was someone else. What did she say? She said I was bad luck. Emma's voice cracked. She said I ruined everything. She said it was my fault she lost money. She said she never wanted me, that I should have died with Mommy and Daddy in the car crash. Several jury members were openly crying now. What happened? Then, Emma. She pulled me out of the car. I fell on the ground. It hurt. The ground was wet and had rocks and glass. I scraped my knees. Then she started hitting me. Emma touched her head with her good hand. Here and here, she touched her ribs. She hit me and hit me. I tried to say sorry, but she wouldn't stop. Then what happened? Then she started kicking me when I was on the ground. I tried to make myself small, tried to protect my head like Daddy taught me if someone tried to hurt me. But she kept kicking, and I couldn't breathe. And I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to see Mommy and Daddy in heaven. The courtroom was absolutely silent, except for the sound of people crying. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes. Then what happened, sweetheart? Judge Waverly asked, her own voice thick with emotion. Emma looked directly at the camera, directly at Gunner. Then I heard a sound like thunder, a really loud voice that said, hey, and Aunt Diane stopped kicking me. Who was the voice? The bear man, Emma said, and now she was smiling through her tears. He came out of the dark. He was really, really big. He had a long beard like a bear, and he had patches on his jacket, and Aunt Diane got scared of him. What did the bear man do? He told Aunt Diane to get away from me, and she did. She got scared and moved back. Then the bear man came over to me, and he was so gentle. He picked me up really, really carefully, like I was made of glass, like Daddy used to pick me up when I was little and fell asleep on the couch. Emma's smile grew, and he said, I got you, little bit. You're safe now, I promise. And his voice was so nice. It wasn't scary at all, even though he was so big. It was kind, and I believed him. I believed he would keep me safe. Did the bear man hurt you, Emma? No, Emma said firmly, shaking her head. No, he saved me. He carried me inside the bright building where it was warm. He was saying, don't die, don't die, please don't die. And I could feel he was crying. I could feel his tears on my face, and I wasn't scared anymore because I knew the bear man would protect me. Judge Waverly leaned forward. Emma, this is very important. I need you to look at the screen and tell me who hurt you that night. The camera switched to show both Diane and Gunnar on split screen. Emma didn't hesitate. She pointed directly at Diane. Aunt Diane, she hurt me because she lost all her money at the slot machines, and she said it was my fault. She said I was cursed and bad luck, and she wished I was never born. Diane stood up, her face contorted with rage and panic. You little liar. You ungrateful little brat. I took care of you. I fed you. I gave you a home. Remove her, Judge Waverly ordered. Deputies rushed forward, but Diane was in a full meltdown now. I should have finished you when I had the chance, she screamed as they grabbed her arms. You ruined my life. Everything was fine before you came along. You deserve everything that happened to you. The courtroom exploded in chaos. Deputies wrestled Diane toward the door as she thrashed and screamed. I'll kill you, you hear me? I'll find a way. You're dead. Get her out of my courtroom, Judge Waverly roared, banging her gavel repeatedly. Diane was dragged out, still screaming threats and obscenities. Her lawyer, Victor Brennan, sat at the prosecution table with his head in his hands, knowing his client had just convicted herself. When order was finally restored, Judge Waverly turned back to the screen. Emma had shrunk back in her hospital bed, terrified, shaking. Emma, sweetheart, she can't hurt you anymore, Judge Waverly said gently. You're safe. She's going away for a very long time. Now, can you answer one more question for me? Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Who saved you that night? Emma looked at the screen at Gunnar. She smiled, a real smile that lit up her whole face despite the tears. The bear man saved me. Gunnar. He's my hero. He kept his promise. He kept me safe. She paused, then said directly to the camera, directly to Gunnar. Thank you for keeping your promise, Bear. You saved my life. I love you. Gunnar's face crumpled. Tears rolled down into his gray beard, disappearing into the silver. He put his hand over his heart and mouthed back, I love you too, little bit. The video feed ended. The screen went dark. But the impact of Emma's testimony lingered in the absolute silence of the courtroom. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was quiet crying from the gallery and jury box. Whelan stood up slowly. His voice was quiet but carried through the entire room. Your Honor, the defense rests. The closing arguments were almost anticlimactic after Emma's devastating testimony. D.A. Thornton tried his best, but his heart wasn't in it anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard compelling testimony from a traumatized child, but we must remember that trauma can affect memory, that children can be influenced, that the defense has had weeks to coach this child to plant suggestions in her vulnerable mind. But even as he said it, he knew it rang hollow. Everyone had seen Emma's face, heard her voice, felt the truth in her words. Whelan's closing was simple and powerful. You heard the truth from the mouth of a 6-year-old girl who has no reason to lie, he began. Emma Grace Wilson told you exactly what happened that night. She told you who hurt her, who brutalized her, who left her for dead in a parking lot, and she told you who saved her. Whelan walked to stand directly in front of the jury box. Marcus Callahan is not a perfect man. He has a criminal record. He's made mistakes in his life. But on the night of March 15th, he did something extraordinary. Something that most people wouldn't have done. He heard a child screaming, and he didn't walk away. He didn't mind his own business. He ran toward that scream. He put himself between a monster and an innocent child. He saved Emma's life. Whelan looked each jury member in the eye. Diane Crawford is the real monster in this case. The evidence proves it beyond any doubt. The timeline proves she abandoned Emma for hours while she gambled away their rent money. The audio proves she blamed Emma for her losses. The video from her ex-husband proves she has a history of violence. The hospital records prove she'd been abusing Emma for months. Her own testimony, her own words in this courtroom prove her guilt. "I should have finished you when I had the chance." Those were her words, confessing to attempted murder in front of all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, send Marcus Callahan home. He's a hero, not a criminal. He kept his promise to a dying child. He protected the innocent. That's not a crime. That's what we should all aspire to do. The jury deliberated for exactly 47 minutes. When they filed back in, none of them would look at the prosecution table. Several looked directly at Gunnar with something that looked like respect. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Waverly asked. The foreman stood. He was a man in his 70s, a Vietnam veteran with white hair and hands that had seen hard work. "We have your honor. What say you? On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant Marcus James Callahan not guilty." The courtroom erupted in cheers from the right side where the veterans and Iron Horsemen sat. "On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant Marcus James Callahan not guilty." More cheers. Gunnar dropped his head, shoulders shaking. "On the charge of kidnapping, we find the defendant Marcus James Callahan not guilty." The courtroom exploded. Iron Horsemen roared, hugging each other. Veterans shouted in celebration. The sound was deafening. Judge Waverly banged her gavel, but she was smiling. "Order, order in this court." When the noise finally subsided, she looked at Gunnar. "Mr. Callahan, you are free to go. All charges are dismissed with prejudice." Then she did something unusual, something judges rarely do. She stepped down from her bench and walked over to the defense table. "Mr. Callahan," she said, looking him in the eye, "I want to say something that's not in my usual script. Thank you. Thank you for being in that parking lot that night. Thank you for doing what too many people in our society wouldn't do. You heard a child in danger and you acted. You saved Emma Wilson's life. That little girl's alive today because of you. And for that, you have my respect and my gratitude." Gunnar stood, wiping his eyes. "Thank you, Your Honor." Judge Waverly's voice turned cold as ice. "However, I am issuing an arrest warrant for Diane Crawford on the following charges: attempted murder in the first degree, felony child abuse, perjury, fraud, intimidation of a witness, and making terroristic threats. Bail is denied. She is to be remanded to custody immediately upon location." She looked at the bailiff. "Find her now." But Diane was already gone. She'd fled the courthouse during the chaos of the verdict, knowing what was coming. But she wouldn't get far. The Iron Horsemen were already on it. 1 hour later, Gunnar walked out of the courthouse, a free man for the first time in 7 weeks. The rain had finally stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time in days, casting everything in gold. 30 Iron Horsemen were waiting for him on the courthouse steps, lined up on their motorcycles in perfect formation. When they saw him emerge, they started their engines in unison, a thunderous salute that echoed off the buildings. Reaper, the club president, walked up the steps. He handed Gunnar his cut, the leather vest he'd been stripped of 7 weeks ago, the vest that meant everything to him. "Welcome home, brother," Reaper said, embracing him. Gunnar slipped the vest on. It felt right, like a part of him that had been missing was finally restored. But there was something he had to do first, someone he needed to see. "I need to go to the hospital," Gunnar said. "We know," Reaper said, grinning. "We're all going, every single one of us. That little girl has a family waiting to meet her." 20 minutes later, a parade of 30 motorcycles pulled up to St. Michael's Medical Center. The nurses came to the windows to watch, smiling. Security waved them through. Everyone had seen the news. Everyone knew the story now. Gunnar walked through the hospital corridors with purpose, his boots echoing on the linoleum. His heart was pounding harder than it ever had in combat, harder than it had in any fight. When he reached room 304 in the pediatric wing, he paused outside the door. His hands were shaking. He knocked softly. "Come in," Sarah's voice called. Gunnar pushed open the door. Emma was sitting up in bed, no longer connected to monitors and machines. She was wearing normal pajamas now, covered in cartoon bears. Her face was healing, the bruises almost gone. When she saw him, her entire face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Bear!" she cried out. Gunnar crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her bed. Emma threw her arms around his neck, holding on as tight as her small arms could manage. "You came," she whispered into his beard. "I promised, didn't I?" Gunnar said, his voice rough with emotion. "I always keep my promises, little bit." "Are you in trouble? Did they put you in jail?" "No, sweetheart. It's all over. You were so brave. You told the truth and you saved both of us. You're the hero, Emma, not me." Emma pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "What happens now? Do I have to go to foster care?" Gunnar looked at Sarah, who stood by the window smiling. She nodded encouragingly. "Emma," Gunnar said carefully, his voice shaking slightly, "how would you feel about staying with me if the court says it's okay, if they let me take care of you?" Emma's eyes went wide, filling with tears, but happy tears this time. "Really, forever and ever. Forever and always, little bit." Emma started crying, nodding frantically. "Yes, yes, yes, yes. I want to stay with you. You're my bear. You're my family." Behind Gunnar, the door opened. CPS agent Linda Bowen walked in with a folder under her arm and a smile on her face. She'd been investigating Gunnar for weeks, checking his background, interviewing everyone who knew him, inspecting his apartment. "Mr. Callahan," Linda said, "I've completed my evaluation. And given the circumstances, given Emma's clear attachment to you, and given the recommendations from Dr. Rothman, Sarah Mitchell, and numerous character witnesses, I'm recommending emergency foster placement with you, effective immediately pending formal adoption proceedings." Gunnar couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears streaming down his face into his beard. "Emma," Linda said, kneeling down beside the bed, "is this really what you want to live with Mr. Callahan?" "Yes," Emma said firmly. "He's my bear. He keeps me safe. He promised, and he always keeps his promises." "Then it's settled," Linda said, signing papers in her folder. "Welcome to fatherhood, Mr. Callahan. I hope you're ready for tea parties and bedtime stories." "I'm ready for anything," Gunnar said, smiling through his tears. Outside in the hallway, the Iron Horsemen waited. When they saw Gunnar walk out of the hospital carrying Emma in his arms, they all stood at attention. 30 massive men in leather standing straight and respectful like soldiers at a funeral. Wrench was crying openly, thinking of Cody, thinking that maybe this was redemption for all of them. Maybe this was their chance to do something good to protect instead of destroy. Emma looked at all the motorcycles and all the big men in leather, and her eyes went wide with wonder. "Are they all bears too?" she whispered to Gunnar. "Yeah, a little bit," Gunnar said, smiling. "They're your family now. All of them, every single one." Reaper walked over carrying a small package. He knelt down so he was eye level with Emma. "Welcome to the family, little sister," he said in his gravelly voice. He handed her the package. Emma opened it carefully. Inside was a small leather vest, child-size with a single patch on the back. "Protected by Iron Horseman MC." Emma's eyes lit up. "This is for me." "That means you're one of us now," Reaper said. "Nobody hurts family, ever. You understand you're under our protection." "Ways." Emma put the vest on over her pajamas. It fit perfectly. She beamed. Behind them, a commotion erupted. Police cars pulled up, sirens wailing. Diane Crawford was being dragged out of a motel 3 blocks away where she'd been hiding. She was in handcuffs, screaming, still trying to spin her story. "It's not fair. She lied. That biker brainwashed her. I'm the victim. I'm the victim." Nobody was listening anymore. Emma watched from Gunnar's arms as her aunt was stuffed into a police car. For the first time, Emma didn't feel scared. She felt safe because she had a bear, and she had a family, and they would never let anyone hurt her again. 3 years later, on a sunny Saturday morning in late spring, a black Harley-Davidson pulled into the driveway of a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The yard was meticulously maintained with flower beds full of roses and tulips. A white picket fence surrounded the property. A bicycle with training wheels removed lay on its side in the grass next to a soccer ball. Gunnar climbed off the bike, his beard grayer now, more silver than dark. His face was more peaceful when the hard edges softened by time and love. He was wearing his cut over a t-shirt that said "Girl Dad" in pink letters. Gunnar, Emma, now 9 years old and gangly with growth, came running out of the house. She was taller, healthier, with bright eyes that sparkled and a smile that never seemed to fade. She wore jeans and her small leather vest over a purple shirt. She crashed into him, and he picked her up, spinning her around like he did every Saturday when he came home from the Iron Horseman clubhouse, where he still worked part-time as a mechanic. "How was school this week?" "Little bit." "Amazing. I got an A+ on my science project about motorcycle engines. Mrs. Martinez said it was the best in the whole fourth grade. She wants me to enter it in the district competition." "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Gunnar set her down and ruffled her hair. Sarah came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was wearing an engagement ring that caught the sunlight. The wedding was planned for next month. "Dinner's almost ready. I'm making Emma's favorite, spaghetti and garlic bread." "Yes," Emma cheered, pumping her fist. The rumble of more motorcycles filled the air. The weekly family dinner had become sacred tradition. Wrench arrived first, followed by Reaper, then 5 other Iron Horseman members. They parked their bikes in a neat row on the street and walked toward the house carrying gifts. A new book for Emma from Wrench, a stuffed bear from Reaper that was almost as big as Emma. The neighbors waved as they walked by. The Johnsons, the Patels, the Williams family. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the story. Some had been skeptical at first about a biker and his motorcycle club friends, but they'd seen how Gunnar was with Emma, how protective, how gentle, how he'd completely transformed his life for her. Inside the house, the walls were covered with photos that told the story of 3 years of healing and love. Emma's first day of school after the adoption, wearing her backpack and holding Gunnar's hand. Emma's adoption day at the courthouse, wearing a princess dress and a tiara, Gunnar in a suit beside her, both of them crying happy tears. Emma and Sarah baking cookies together, flour all over both of them. Emma sitting on Gunnar's motorcycle in the driveway, wearing his sunglasses that were way too big for her face. Emma's 9th birthday party with 30 Iron Horseman members and their families, the biggest celebration the neighborhood had ever seen. Emma's school play, where she played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, Gunnar sitting in the front row, cheering louder than anyone. And on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a motorcycle, was a drawing Emma had made in art class last week. It showed a little girl holding hands with 2 groups of people. On the left, in the clouds, were her mom and dad drawn as angels with wings. On the right, standing on the ground, were Gunnar, Sarah, and a group of men on motorcycles, also with wings drawn around them. In the middle, holding everyone's hands, was Emma. Above the drawing, in careful 9-year-old handwriting, "My 2 families both watching over me." That evening, after the Iron Horseman had left and Sarah was downstairs cleaning up the dishes, despite Gunnar's protest that he'd do them, Gunnar tucked Emma into bed. Her room was painted her favorite color, purple. Stuffed animals lined the shelves, including the massive bear Reaper had given her that took up half the bed. A nightlight shaped like a moon cast soft shadows. "Gunnar," Emma said as he pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Yeah, a little bit. I had a dream about Mommy and Daddy last night." Gunnar sat on the edge of her bed, the frame creaking under his weight. "Yeah, what happened in the dream?" "They told me they were proud of me, that I was brave. And they said," Emma's voice got quiet, "they said they were happy that you found me, that they sent you to save me that night. Do you think that's true?" Gunnar's throat tightened. "I think your mommy and daddy are watching over you from heaven every single day. And I think they're so proud of the brave, smart, kind girl you've become. Do you think they're happy that you're my dad now?" "I know they are, sweetheart. I think they're grateful that I was in the right place at the right time. And I'm grateful too. You know why? Why? Because you saved my life, Emma, just as much as I saved yours." Emma sat up confused. "How did I save you?" Gunnar smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Before I met you, I was lost. I was angry at the world. I'd lost my daughter Lily, and I didn't think I'd ever be happy again. But then I heard you crying that night, and when I picked you up and you called me Bear, something in my heart woke up. You gave me a reason to be better, a reason to keep going, a reason to be a dad again." "So we saved each other?" Emma asked. "Yeah, a little bit. We saved each other." Emma lay back down, smiling. "I like that story." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Gunnar kissed her forehead, turned on her music box that played gentle lullabies, and walked to the door. "Gunnar," Emma called softly. "Yeah." Thank you for keeping your promise that night and every night after. Gunnar felt tears prick his eyes. Always will, Emma. Forever and always. He turned off the light and closed the door softly. Downstairs, Sarah was waiting for him on the couch. They sat together, his arm around her shoulders, watching the local news. The anchor was doing a special report, Where Are They Now?, the Emma Wilson case 3 years later. 3 years ago, 6-year-old Emma Wilson was nearly beaten to death by her Aunt Diane Crawford in a casino parking lot. The case captivated the nation when motorcycle club member Marcus Gunnar Callahan was wrongfully accused of the crime. Tonight we have an update on this remarkable story of redemption. And the screen showed recent footage of Emma at a children's hospital charity event, wearing her small leather vest, handing out teddy bears to sick kids alongside Gunnar and other Iron Horseman members. Her smile was radiant. Emma is now a thriving 9-year-old living with her adoptive father, Marcus Callahan. She's an honor roll student who dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse. Callahan and Emma work together with the Iron Horseman Motorcycle Club, which established the Lily and Emma Foundation. The foundation has raised over $2 million for child abuse prevention and has provided support services to over 5,000 victims nationwide. The report showed footage of Gunnar speaking at a fundraiser, looking uncomfortable in a suit, but speaking with passion about protecting children. Diane Crawford is currently serving a 30-year sentence at the Women's Correctional Facility. She was convicted of attempted murder, child abuse, perjury, fraud, and intimidation of a witness. She will be eligible for parole in 2049. Detective Frank Morrison, who investigated the case, received the Medal of Valor for his integrity in pursuing truth over convenience. Tommy Wrench Hayes, a member of the Iron Horsemen, became a volunteer child advocate and has helped dozens of children escape abusive situations. The report ended with a quote from Emma, now 9 years old, from an interview she'd done for a children's advocacy magazine. "Family isn't always blood," Emma had said, her young voice wise beyond her years. "Sometimes family is the people who show up when you need them most. The bear showed up for me, and he's been showing up every single day since. That's what real family does." Sarah muted the TV and looked at Gunnar. "She's going to be okay. Better than okay. She's going to be amazing." "Yeah," Gunnar said, looking at the photos covering their walls. "Photos of a life rebuilt, a family created from ashes. She already is." Outside, the street was quiet except for the occasional car passing. The moon was bright overhead, full and luminous. And in her purple bedroom upstairs, Emma Grace Wilson Callahan slept peacefully, protected by the bear who had kept his promise, and by the family of Iron Horsemen who would ride through hell itself to keep her safe. Because that's what family does. Not the family you're born into, but the family that chooses you when the world turns dark. The family that shows up when you need them most. And sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they have beards and leather vests and motorcycles. And sometimes they keep promises that change everything, forever and always. Diane Crawford was sentenced to 30 years in state prison for attempted murder, felony child abuse, perjury, fraud, and witness intimidation. She is eligible for parole in 2049. Marcus Gunnar Callahan officially adopted Emma Grace Wilson on June 15, 2024. He married Sarah Mitchell in June 2026, and they continue to raise Emma together. The Iron Horseman Motorcycle Club established the Lily and Emma Foundation, which has provided support to over 5,000 child abuse victims nationwide and raised over $2 million for prevention programs. Emma Grace Callahan graduated high school with honors in 2036 and is currently studying to become a pediatric trauma nurse, inspired by Sarah Mitchell and her own experiences. Detective Frank Morrison received the Medal of Valor for integrity and courage in pursuing truth over convenience in the Crawford case. He retired in 2028 and now volunteers with the Lily and Emma Foundation. Tommy Wrench Hayes became a volunteer child advocate, dedicating his life to helping abused children in memory of his grandson Cody and in honor of Emma's survival. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. And sometimes angels ride motorcycles. Emma Grace Callahan, age 18, from her valedictorian speech, 2036.